A very good afternoon to all the participants of this crack ISA batch. I have with me today again the Vice Chairman of the committee, Dayanivas Sharma ji, and today we have as a faculty, the learned faculty, Naveen Khandelwal ji. So friends, I hope that the previous 2 days would have been good and useful for all of you, and this third day would be equally interesting. Naveen Khandelwal ji will take you through the business continuity planning module and other things of the information system audit. And I hope that you have good learning, and once again wishing you that you very soon clear the ISA exams. And without much taking much time, I straight away hand over to the Vice Chairman, the University.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman sir. Good morning, Naveen ji. Good morning to all participants. My best wishes to each one of you who have completed 2 days of training to crack ISA exam. I also received a couple of interesting messages from people where they said that they have completed in their respective branches and then they have joined this ISA course again for the 3 days refresher course or 3 days crash course. I think this multiple, going through the subject will make whole lot of difference in your examination. We have comfortable time, which is today 12th and 29th is our examination. You all can actually well prepare and get ready and be the technology chartered accountants, computer chartered accountants, or might be information system auditors. Because as we discussed 3 days, we talked about the various regulators which are actually expecting us to be qualified enough to be handling the technology part of their audit section. So with this learning, I wish you all a great learning experience as well as best of luck for your examinations, and get prepared, give little time. No due dates are there. So you have due date of only 29th as such today. So my best wishes to everyone. Over to you, Chairman sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dayabai. And now, Naveen ji, over to you. The session is all yours.
Thank you, Manu sir. So very good afternoon to everyone, and let's start with our session on this business continuity planning. Friends, this topic is more or less very simple to be understood. Why? Because we all know in this DSA course we have different components, right from module 1 to module 7, and this module gives you a different perspective to this information system audit and talks about more of businesses to remain a going concern. And to ensure that going concern, we need to cater to the failure in event of any disaster happening. So friends, we'll be talking about how to handle that failure in the business, not in terms of the business concept, but in terms of any disaster. With respect to exams, I think very important, as I said, because it carries about 10 to 14 marks in the exam pad. And I would suggest, friends, that BCP in general is relatively easy in comparison to other modules. Why? Because it's more process oriented, not much of technical jargon involved. And as such, as a strategy for exam preparation, I would always suggest that you should take this topic very seriously and try to cover each and every aspect of this particular module, because I'm sure out of the 10 to 15 marks, you'll be able to score minimum 70% if you go through all the contents, because less of technical jargon, more of step-oriented, process-oriented, and you just need to remember the logical sequence of steps. And if you do that, probably you'll be able to crack the exam questions very easily. So the whole chapter is divided into different parts. One is obviously the basic concepts and basic terms. And thereafter, we'll try to cover within the short frame the second aspect of how to develop that BCP plan, which is the most important part. Not going to the background of why it is required, we all know that, but this is important. World across, we have different standards. Apart from our IS standards, we have the ISO standards, which also talks about business continuity management. So ISO 22301 and ISO 27031, These are important standards which have been talking about this business continuity management along with the COVID framework. So we have the COVID-5 framework which talks about business continuity management. So it highlights the importance that this concept is being introduced in various standards and framework. So we need to be updated and we need to be aware of this concept because it is an integral part of the information system audit. Apart from that, if we see the various laws within India or internationally also, there are a lot of laws which talks about ensuring business continuity planning systems within the organization and also calls about for maintenance of records for a particular time period. So that itself highlights the importance of this particular act, friends. We know that IT systems do fail. Apart from IT systems, there are other events which can impact our businesses. So a lot of reasons for IT systems failing, not going into details of each of the reasons why IT system fails. But yes, I think we all know, and it has happened quite frequently with a lot of businesses where the IT systems have stuck, hung up, or not able to work. And even the best of the systems have failed. If you see the examples of National Stock Exchange, there at times, the National Stock Exchange system has failed to deliver. So that again highlights the importance of this concept, BCP. Certain terms with respect to exams, please do remember certain important things which are very common. So the first word is crisis, which we all know. Crisis is an abnormal situation. Difference between crisis and incident, two things which you have to remember. Though normally we can interchange it, but in terms of BCP, remember, incident is a small event which can lead to crisis. That's the differentiation between crisis and incident. So sparking is an incident which can lead to fire, which can lead to a crisis. So that is the difference. So crisis is an abnormal situation, and incident is which has the capacity to lead to a crisis. Then after that, we have the word disaster, which is purely unplanned, which can happen anytime, which can interrupt the normal business process. Apart from that, we know the word risk, which is being discussed in this whole audit arena, and vulnerability, which is the weakness part. Then certain important things. Yes, here comes the exam question, friends, difference between the word DRP and BCP. So the whole process basically starts with the incident management plan, because it is not necessary that every incident could culminate into a crisis. So therefore, it is better that if there's an incident management plan, and if we plug all those incident at the source level, then probably we'll be able to curtail the overall disaster impact. So therefore, we start with the incident management plan, which talks about that if there is a small incident, then what has to be done, the key personnel, the resources, the services, the actions to be needed to manage that incident. But if that incident is not managed, probably then we need to shift to the DRP plan. So within this whole BCP, there are different small elements which are there. So we need to remember those small elements. And obviously the word itself differentiates that what is to be included in that particular plan. So incident management plan talks about the small actions to be taken to cover that incident. If then incident converts into a crisis, then we have to activate that DRP. Now, normally, when friends, there's always a confusion between the word BCP and DRP. Remember, though in a common parlance, these two words are interchangeable. But technically, we need to differentiate between these two words. So DRP purely focuses on the recovery part. Remember the word recovery, that's the differentiating element between the word DRP and business continuity planning. So recovery, DRP will focus on recovery of normal operations, while BCP will focus on continuity of the business operations, even if the disaster is continued or if the disaster is over, thereafter, we need to ensure the continuity of the business. So BCP will purely focus on continuity, let's say for 3, 4, 5, 7 days, and thereafter the recovery process will start to the normal side. So that is the difference between the word BCP and DRP. Commonly asked question in the exam, BCP and DRP. And thereafter another word comes in, VCM. Friends. Now what is VCM? VCM purely focuses on the holistic point of view. It covers BCP, it covers DRP. So it's an holistic approach developed by the management, which will focus on developing a policy, VCM policy, and thereafter they'll start developing the plan, which will include the BCP, DRP, and the incident management plan. So VCM is a board level concept, which tells us that we need to implement the BCP, DRP, and ICAI incident recovery plan. Some more related terms, I think, again, very common, not to be discussed because these are all self-explanatory and already covered in different topics. But one thing which is last is the residual risk, which we all know. See, the whole BCP and DRP plans are to be focused on the residual risk, very important, because for other type of risk which is quantifiable and which could be identified, for there we implement the control. Obviously, the cost benefit analysis has to be taken into consideration. But finally, if you think that we have covered all the known risk, then what is remaining? Obviously, there is certain element which always remain there, and that is known as residual risk. So natural disaster could be one thing, residual risk, where we cannot plan for, even if we have implemented a lot of controls. So BCP and DRP focuses to cover that residual risk, and that is why we have that plan. So what is BCP, friends? The whole concept, remember, though in general, when I talk about what type of control is it, BCP, whether it is preventive, detective, and corrective control, the objective is, remember, the BCP plan. See, DRP is a corrective control, disaster recovery plan. Now, when I frame this plan, the business continuity planning, when I create this plan, what is the objective? The objective is not to prevent a disaster. Obviously, disaster will come, but the objective is to prevent the losses, reduce the recovery time. So one of the objective of BCP, or the objective of BCP, could be, summarized in word 5R. Remember this 5R, very important. We have heard the word 3R for environment, but I'm focusing here on the word 5R, which focuses on reduce. Right? So reduce is what? To reduce the losses. That is the objective. So in a way, in a small element, it could be type of a preventive control, not classified as preventive control, but the objective is to reduce the losses. Then respond to any incident. That's the incident management plan. So we need to respond to whatever is happening. And then we focus on the recovery and the resumption part. And then the last is restore and return to our normal operations, to the level which we are as of today. So the whole process focuses on this 5R, and everything is designed around this 5R. Remember this 5R, probably if you understand this 5R, then probably you'll understand the structuring and creation of the plan, and you'll understand the question. That question is asked for reduction part, or responding part, or recovery part, or restoration part. So that means you will be able to answer if you segregate this whole process into these 5R things. Now, this is an important part, friends, with respect to exam. What if there is no BCP plan within the organization? And that's a question you need to ask to your client today to generate more work for yourself, friends, because as we know, this is important. So you focus on this, highlight this importance, and send this as a slide, single standalone slide, or a paper to your client, that if you are not having a BCP, then what is the risk which you carry? And obviously the risks are many, apart from the business control failure, continuity failure. That is the important part. Apart from that, there are certain ancillary risks which are attached to that. So we need to be aware of the risk, and normally this is an exam question, and very simple to answer, which we can very naturally answer. And so very important, you need to know the risk of inadequate BCP. Then the other side, there is a risk to inadequate BCP. Then what is the advantage or the objective of BCP? So we need to look at both the perspective. So maybe risk is covering the 4 or 5 elements. The objective will be covering more than 4 or 5 elements. So as I said, we need to focus on 5R. And here the concept is to manage the risk. First is whatever risk which we foresee, we try to manage that risk by implementing control. Then the objective is, if a disaster happens, we try to reduce the time to recover from that incident, minimize the risk and recovery process. That means we design the risk process in such a way where there's no flaw in the recovery itself. There might be a flaw before the event has happened, but after the event has happened, if we want to recover, the process should be flawless. And obviously the objective is that the cost involved should be low. That is why we pre-plan things and automatically try to reduce the cost. So that is the advantage of BCP, to reduce the cost of recovery. Then protect your staff, their welfare. That is the most important angle. And protect the damage which could be caused to the organization, maintain their reputation, relationship with the customer, and ensure the market share is not lost or the others do not gain a competitive advantage. let's say, for example, if the Zomato servers go down for 3 hours during peak time, what could happen to the business of Zomato? So if they don't have a proper BCP, everybody will switch on to Swiggy during that prime time. And once you log on to your competitors, once people log on to your competitors' platform, then they see the advantages, and maybe that could cause a long-term damage to the company. So as I said, we have discussed this concept VCM. VCM comprises of all the three elements, IRP, DRP, and BCP part. So VCM is more of an holistic approach. Difference which we have already discussed is with respect to the holistic approach. Remember, BCP, then DRP, and then VCM. That's how the subset and the whole set is recognized. So first focus is business continuity, then we come to disaster recovery, and then the overall VCM is maintained. Okay, so yes, a small element on the word disaster. I think we all are aware of the word disaster. What are the different types of disaster, the man-made and natural. Not focusing on those disasters, but the disaster have different phases. The example could be that a serious fire working, during working hours. So that the phases could be that all phases of my plan or business could be impacted. Serious fire outside during working hours. So in that case, what could happen that people are not working in my place because it is happening outside my working hours. So maybe all the phases of DRP would not be activated, VCM would not be activated because I don't need to take care of public evacuation. Very minor fire during working hours. So I need to just activate the incident management plan or the crisis phase and not activate the whole BCP. So there are different examples of disaster which could have an impact on different phases of my BCP plan. So based on the nature of disaster, I need to activate the respective plan. So this was a small introduction on the BCP. So let us now move on to the development of the BCP plan. It's a very important development of the plan. How do I develop that plan? Okay. So what are the steps in development of this plan? It's a very important part because this is where the main questions are focused in. And this will help you in developing the whole BCP plan by following the different steps and some terms to be understood with respect to exam. So the plan could be segregated into different parts. Let us straight away jump on to the, yes, before that, again, very important element, friends. As a consultant today, what are the services as an IS auditor we can provide? Very important. So within this particular module, within this particular concept, we are able to provide various kind of services. Apart from developing that BCP plan, which is the core to this particular module, we can always add on our inputs on different aspects. So if we are not given the whole assignment of developing the BCP, we can help in implementing, conducting tests, doing an audit of the BCP plan, and doing a particular phase of risk assessment and BIA. That could be also be possible. So friends, I would suggest that going forward, once you are done with your DSA exams and get that certificate or degree, then I would suggest that please explore this possibility of implementing this plan where? At your office. Let's start with our office. And I think once you start with your office, develop a 2, 3, 5 small 5-pager plans for your office. That's it. Once you start doing it, then you gradually move on to your next office, the 3rd office, 4th office. And that's how you start your work, friends. Once you start doing that, my client might be telling you, I have it, I have everything in place, my network team, my IT team is taking care of it. But the most important angle is, friends, convince your client that yes, they might be having a plan, everything is in place. Is it documented? Is it documented? And there is your role as an information system auditor, that you will document this plan. And that is how we start working on this opportunity, friends. Okay, so what is the requirement to develop this plan? What is the prerequisite? So remember, friends, to develop this plan has to be taken from the perspective of as a project. I think there's another chapter, I think in Sdlc, project management tools or the concept of project. So there you need to consider this particular development of a plan as a project. And whatever requirements are there for the project element, you need to have those requirements. So remember, the prerequisite is that you need to have this as a project. When you have a project, so you have a project team, you have a goal setting, you have a time frame, you have a certain standard, a framework where you have to design this plan. So all these things are required before you start developing that particular plan. So when you consider this as a project, it has to be in a right framework and under the guidance of a steering committee or project team. Great. So what do we need? So once we have this, we develop this AP, that we need to develop this plan within a 2 months time frame, and 3 people are identified from the board or the senior management to take a overview of the development of the process, and we design the different elements of the project. Then how do we go about it? So there are about 6 phases. If you see the 6 phases, remember from exam perspective, very important. If you, as I said, if you break all these whole structure into different parts, then it is easier for you to understand. So there are the 6 phases, starting from the first phase, BIA, Business Impact Analysis. BIA, friends, very important. Then the second element of RA, Risk Assessment. Then actually the development of the plan. So once you have done this pre-analysis, you develop this plan. Then the ancillary steps which comes in is testing, training, and the maintenance of this plan. So 4th, 5th, and 6th are always standard. So if you have studied Sdlc, probably it is just a replica of Sdlc where it is testing, training, and implementation, and maintenance is there, changes to the Sdlc. So the first 2 is again similar to Sdlc, where you do a requirement analysis. So here we are not doing a requirement analysis, we are doing a business impact analysis. So requirement analysis taken by business impact analysis. Development is basically coding. It's nothing like similar to Sdlc coding. So if you remember the phases of Sdlc, it is more or less similar, though the terms have changed. So very important, if you know the phases, then it is easier for you to understand the question. I think the biggest problem in all these DC exams have been to understand the question, the technical way they are trying to ask in, and at which particular level they are asking. Where do I need to look into? That's the problem, So I think once you understand this, it's easier to understand the questions, and probably then easier to analyze the answer also. So friends, starting with the first phase, BIA. Now what does BIA focuses on? It focuses on, one major thing. If you don't have a BIA, probably the organization will never be analyzed the need for recoverability. Because unless you don't understand what could be the impact on my business, I will never be able to design my recovery plan. So as I said, when you start working on a BCP plan for your office, first analyze that if a disaster happens or if an event happens, will it impact my business? So answer is yes, it will impact your business. If it is no, so then just leave aside. Don't need to worry about any BCP plan. So it establishes the need for an organization that you need to set a plan for recoverability and the requirement for the recovery part. Now, what is the outcome? How do I define this BIA? So it's a means of systematically assessing the potential impact resulting from various events. So as the word is saying, impact analysis. So we understand the potential impact on business functions. Remember, BIA focuses on the impact on the business functions, not only on the IT functions. Very important, friends. It understands the impact on the business functions, not only on the IT functions. So that is one way to look into BIA. So the process, as I said, it will focus on business functions. Once it understands the various business functions, so be it IT function, be it sales, be it marketing, finance, HR, these are all business functions. And within the business function, we lay down the processes and the IT systems which are inbuilt within this business function. And we understand the impact. The impact, let's say, for example, what will happen if my site goes down? What will happen if my delivery team is not available? What will happen if my app is not working? What can happen if my HR team to take care, finance team, my banking team is not there if disaster happens? So I need to understand the impact of each disaster on each of the functions. It is not necessary that each disaster can have an impact on my delivery team or my finance team or my IT teams. So I need to understand the impact on each of my business functions by each of the different events. And the impact could be judged on various criteria. It's not only about calculating the loss part, but it could be judged on the process of criticality, the financial, the operational part, recovery, dependency also. It's not necessary that, I need to look at the whole process standalone. Let's say, for example, my delivery team will be working only if the stock is there. So my stock, where my warehouse is located, I need to link it with my delivery team. So that's a dependency that a warehouse and delivery team both will have to be looked into in conjunction. So friends, this is a very broad-based document where I will analyze each of my business function and understand the impact on each of the business function. Now, what is the end result? Very important from exam perspective. The end result is that why do I need to do this BIA? Because I will set out the prioritization of the recovery sequence of the business functions. So wherever I would feel the impact is high, or I would classify the business function as very critical, vital, important, less important, then probably I will lay down the recovery process sequence. That first thing, which is very important for me, for my business, is to recover business function A, B, without which I will not be able to run my business. Now, this is the important exam question. Why do we do BIA? Is to prioritize the recovery sequence of the business function. Remember this exam question. To further add to it, probably we can also define the minimum operating requirements which we need to have to maintain that continuity of business in the event of disaster. Two things very important. Remember, mark it, note it down, friends. Prioritizing the recovery sequence and defining the minimum operating requirement. And once you said that, probably you lay down the base for designing the plan part. So there are different steps to be undertaken in BI, which we have already discussed, identifying all the risks for each of the business function, identifying the critical business process. Now, how will you do that? The exam question, how do you assess the critical business processes? That's an exam question. So you'll meet people, you'll meet the top level people, interview them, question them, then you'll come to know the criticality of business process. Then you will try to calculate the impact of risk on each of the business functions, quantification, as I said, interdependency of various business functions, and very important things, friends. Again, some important technical terms which are relevant from exam perspective. Remember those terms. Determine MAD. What does MAD means? Maximum allowable downtime. MAD, MAD. Now, what is this MAD? Let us take some more words and understand these words. Yes. So, friends, we will take four terms. Four terms, which is an outcome of BIA. Outcome of BIA. Remember, four terms which are outcome of BIA. Now, what are the four terms? RPO, recovery point objective. RTO, recovery time objective. MTD, maximum tolerable downtime, or MTPD, maximum tolerable period of disruption. Both are same thing. Or MAO. These are all common terms. Remember from exam perspective, friends. Normally, these are terms which are also linked to questions on different topics, not necessarily BCP. So just remember these terms and let us understand these terms. So what is RPO and recovery time objective? See, RPO is the time or a point where you can restore the data. And recovery time objective is the time in which minimum time required, minimum time laid down for recovery of the business process of the business process. And maximum tolerable period of disruption or maximum allowable downtime would be the highest point where you can work without these systems or the business processes. Now, how do you interlink all these terms? That's important. So let's take one diagram. Now, let's say there's a point, recovery point objective. For example, the time is 1 p.m. Now, I define my recovery point objective as 5 hours. 5 hours. Recovery point objective, 5 hours. That means if I have taken a backup at 1 p.m., I will take another backup at 6 p.m., which simply means that I am willing to accept a data loss of 5 hours if a disaster happens at 5:59. That means in effect 4 hours 59 minutes. So my recovery point objective is defined as 5 hours. I define that I am willing to accept a data loss of 5 hours. Whatever loss would be there because of that lack of data for that 5 years, I will accept that. And I define that RPO is 5 hours. So recovery point objective means the point or the data loss which you are willing to accept for that particular hours. So if a disaster happens at 3 p.m., that means I will lose data of 2 hours because I have a last backup of 1 hour. So not necessary that you have to define for 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours as RPO. For some critical organizations, the RPO could be 1 second. Right? For let's say National Stock Exchange, for similar kind of organization, I cannot afford to lose data because if the transactions are happening at a particular price keep on fluctuating with a nanosecond. So my RPO could be a nanosecond. That's also possible. So when I set my RPO as 5 hours, then next, what do I need to do? Then I define my RTO, which means this is the time frame. Once the disaster happens, within this time frame, I should be able to recover my operations. So let's say I define my RTO as 4 hours. So if a disaster happens at 5 p.m., I should be able to recover at 9 p.m. That is RTO. Now, maximum allowable downtime would include, MAD will include RTO plus WRT. Now, what is WRT, friends? It's work recovery time. Because you may be able to recover the operations, but you need to ensure the integrity of data. You need to ensure verify the system whole in processes, all the logs are working. So that may require additional 1 hour. So if I define my RTO as 4 hours, 1 hour as WRT, work recovery time. So my maximum allowable downtime would be 5 hours. That is MAD. That means I'm willing to accept that 5 hours I may not be working properly. Now remember, RPO and RTO are two independent things. Maximum allowable downtime will not include the figures of RPO, the time frame of RPO. That's independent of RTO. But these are the two terms which are defined under BIA. That's the outcome of BIA. So remember, friends, these 4 terms which are defined under BIA, RPO, RTO, MAD, and WRT. And the relationship of MAD with respect to RTO and WRT. That's mathematically related. Then the next step, friends, the next step calls for risk assessment. The first step is BIA, the second step is risk assessment. And we know what is risk assessment because it has been done in various modules also. So what do you do in risk assessment with respect to BCP? I think first step is, see, as I said, when you start doing it for your own office, probably it will be very easy for you to take this process on. So let's say if I tell you, if you do a risk assessment of an office today, so how do you do your risk assessment? So you list down all the risks. That is the first step, that what are the risks which are there. So it could be natural, human, man-made, technological, and so on. And then you do a risk assessment out of all these potential risks, which are the possible risks which can impact my office. working at my office. So is it a flood which can impact my office? If my office is at 6th floor, is it a possibility that flood can impact my office at 6th floor? Probably no. But in fire, the answer is yes, there could be possibility. So out of all the potential risks, identify the risk which can impact my office. And very important, analyze the probability of such risk. For example, a fire at my office. So if my building is newly built, the chances of fire are less. So probability of fire could be 0.05. But if my building is old and you see wires being laid down in open, the chances of fire is more. So probability could be 0.20. So my risk assessment will call for identifying the risk, assigning a probability to that also. That what is the probability of that risk? So if there is a problem of data theft in my office, what is the chances? So if you don't have proper controls, then the chances are high. So risk assessment will call for identifying the risk, trying to map the probability. Why? Because for that, we need to identify the controls. So you need to identify my controls, then map it with the risk which is there, give a probability. And if you see there is a high risk in a particular area, implement more controls. So if there's a vulnerability, implement more controls through technical, operational, and management controls. And once you do that, once you feel that, yes, I have implemented control, then you have the residual risk. Again, I'm trying to identify what are the residual risks. And for that, we create the plan, the contingency plan. So risk assessment is a document, friends, where you identify all the potential risk and the probability of such risk impacting my office. And once you do that, then you implement the controls and plan for the DRP part. So two elements where as chartered accountants, as information system auditor, we can focus on is the BIA and risk assessment, because these are documents which will create the base for developing of your BCP plan. So we have the different assessment in this risk management. So we have the information risk assessment, the vulnerability assessment, the weakness, and the likelihood, as I said, the probability based on your current scenario. And then finally, the impact analysis, that if this risk comes in, if this risk has an impact on my office, let's say, for example, if there's a possibility of fire, what is the damage it can cause to me? So that's an impact analysis. And that impact analysis will give you an ultimate analyzing of risk ranking, whether that risk is critical, vital, sensitive, or non-critical. Because finally, at the end result, if the impact is high, I need to identify, I need to implement controls for that. So the end result of the risk assessment could be risk ranking. That risk ranking could be done on the basis of the cost of the asset. Let's say fire is there, then it can cause damage to my asset to worth of, let's say, 20 lakhs. So that is one way. Chances of fire are high, so the percentage is high. Weakness is low, that is why the chances are high. So based on all these criteria as parameters, we take an average of these figures and try to calculate the risk and classify the risk as critical, vital, sensitive, and non-critical. Exam question. These are important questions. Exam, how do you do that risk assessment? By taking various parameters of costing, probability, and taking an average, and then classifying that particular risk as critical or any other definition which you can give it. Another way of looking at risk assessment will be equal to threat into vulnerability into impact. Multiplicative effect of calculating risk, T into V into I, friends. The third phase, which talks about developing the plan. You are focusing on how to develop that plan now. Now, as I said, friends, the first two steps were more of the analysis part. You document that. Now, based on that, we try to develop that plan. So that plan will be only developed when we have a sign-off of the BIA. We agree to the RTO, we agree to the RPO, we agree to the criticality of which business process and the risk assessment. And now we start developing the plan. Now, when we talk of developing the plan, it focuses on step-by-step approach. It focuses on step-by-step approach of how to act in the event of an incident or a crisis or disaster. And when you develop a step-by-step approach, it will engulf department, various divisions, various sites, and various people, and give a responsibility to each of the people and identify all the stakeholders. So developing a plan is purely step-by-step process. For example, if I say that, let's say somebody sees a sparking happening at a corner of a room. Now, what one has to do if there is a small incident? So that is written in the plan. If you see a small incident, either first thing you need to put it off, and for putting it off, you need to have a fire extinguisher. That fire extinguisher will be available in this room. So everybody should be knowing within that particular room that where is the fire extinguisher, how much time it should take to reach that fire extinguisher, how much time it should be there to bring that fire extinguisher, how much time to remove that fire, extinguish that fire. All this will be given in that BCP plan for small incident and steps. So from exam perspective, developing a BCP plan phase would be more procedure oriented and logical sequence of steps to be taken. So nothing technical to be understood here, except you need to know the process which one has to take. And for doing this, there are a lot of teams involved. When you develop this BCP plan, as I said, it's not a small step or a small plan, and it involves the whole business. So there are different teams which are involved in this whole process, and each team will be given a different responsibility. So it's not that a separate department is created, friends. We don't have a BCP department. It's within the existing team members which are there who are working. They will be given an additional responsibility because these are very abnormal situations. So the team is differentiated, the task is identified, and what task to be done will depend upon the name of the team. So in exams, there could be a question that what would a facility team would be doing, what would be insurance team would be doing. So insurance team would be, as soon as the damage is done, they would try to assess the damage, try to cross-check it with the insurance plans which the company has taken, get connected with the insurance agencies, and then try to start with the claiming of the insurance amount. So that's the job of insurance team. The logistic team will make arrangement for transportation of people or the material from the main site to the alternative site also. So that's the job of logistic team. So each of the team will be given certain responsibility, and they will be activated or they will be recognized in this third phase of development of the BCP plan. The next step, friends, comes in once you develop this plan. Obviously, it does not end here. So we need to focus on the testing part, testing of BCP. So again, trying to recall my Sdlc chapter, there are different types of testing techniques. So see here also we have different types of tests. Very similar. The words are similar, I think, which we all understand. The different types of tests are checklist which is done on paper. I think it is one of the same kind in Sdlc. Structured walkthrough test is again done on paper, but then structured walkthrough is done by more senior people who just at a glance can go through the whole plan and identify the errors. Or it could be, a group of people coming together and doing the testing together. Then the simulation test is trying to build in a live environment, in a testing environment, test environment, small situations, scenario could be created. Parallel is something where you are working and then simultaneously testing is also going on. Maybe not disrupting your normal operations, and full interruption where the normal operations may be disturbed. And that is the real test of this BCP plan. So different types of tests, and each test is undertaken based on the time availability and the nature of business also. But finally, we know the most effective would be the full interruption test, But yes, every test has its own importance. Then once the testing is done, we need to create that awareness. That's more important, friends, because keeping it to a small local level, it would not be sufficient enough. So we need to create that training process. And there are different ways of training. Similar way, the way we have done the testing, we can do a walkthrough session. As I said, walkthrough session could be a group of people coming together, sitting on a round table, taking out a paper and discussing each of the points of this particular plan, identifying the gaps or not the gaps, but then identifying the steps and trying to understand what has to be done. Gaps would be identified in the test part. Then scenario workshop and live test simulations are again two different kinds of testing technique. The scenario workshop could be small workshops which are for a particular group of people, while live test simulation could involve more people, more departments, and at a broader scale. So these are the different ways of doing training and spreading this awareness of this BCP plan. Finally, the maintenance part, friends. Maintenance are important, as we know that BCP is not a static document. It has to be dynamic because things change, a lot of things change. And therefore, we need to identify first the triggers where we need to change the BCP plan. And once that trigger is activated, we need to revise that plan. And obviously, the whole process has to be repeated. So first exam question, whether BCP needs to be updated. The answer is yes, it has to be updated. Now, where it is to be updated? To the site where it is being located. And also, if there's a backup of the BCP, we need to update the BCP backup also. Remember, that's very important. So both the things have to be updated. Right. So finally, the few small elements regarding this BCP concept is on backup strategies, friends. Few terms which you need to know. It's about data backup strategies. We all know we have to take backup of data, and we all have been doing it. Now, only thing is the different techniques of taking a backup. So the different techniques are one very simple dual recording of data, which is simply taking a live backup. Other words could be mirror backup. So we have a live backup of all the transactions happening on a real-time basis. That's dual recording of data. Seamlessly, we are recording data at some other place. Periodic dumping of data is taking a backup of periodic time intervals. Third and fourth more or same, but then some technical difference. It could be logging of input transactions. Now, that means we are trying to take backup of each individual day, only the changes. Let's say you have taken a periodic dump on Sunday, and then you take a backup of all the input transactions on Monday, and then Tuesday and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and so on. So if you want to recover data, then you need to take a backup of Saturday, then Friday, Thursday, Wednesday in sequence, and then you take up the backup of Sunday, and you have the whole data as of today. So logging of input transactions would be taking the backup of each individual day changes. Now, logging changes to the data would be, we have a periodic dump on Sunday, you take a backup of Monday, and you take a backup of Tuesday, but that Tuesday backup will include the backup of Monday, Wednesday will include Monday, Tuesday, and so on. So if you want to recover data, then backup of Sunday plus the backup of Saturday, that will give you the whole data. So that is the difference only between logging changes to the data and logging input transactions. Then there could be different backup for LAN systems, for data communications, not going to detail for LAN systems and data communication. Though yes, maybe in exams they might be relevant because as I said, you need to understand the question. So the question is about strategies for LAN systems. So you need to identify the word LAN system, whether it's for data, whether it's for data communication, whether it's for voice communication. So you need to differentiate that word, that my backup strategy is for which particular area. Yes, this is important, friends. Alternative sites. This is an important element for the recovery part. And we all know that there are different ways of recovering my operations. And the different words are cold site, hot site, warm site, and reciprocal agreement. So as a company, you need to decide that with which particular site agency we need to have an arrangement for recovering our operations. Now that will be based on what, friends? That will be based on the BIA. Once my BI has been defined, my RTO, RPO has been defined, then I will be able to take a call on my alternative processing facility arrangement. So if my recovery time objective is, let's say, 10 days, so that means I have an option of making an arrangement with the coal site also. But if it's, let's say, recovery time is 1 day RTO, then I need to make an arrangement with hot site. So it all depends upon my analysis of BIA. And we all know the difference between all these 4 sites. So from exam perspective, I'm sure that 1 question or 2 questions are definite out of this particular topic between the difference between all these sites. So we have the hot site, which is always recommended, so that when your recovery time objective or maximum allowable downtime is low, then you need to have an arrangement with hot site where all the arrangements are ready. You just need to take your data and then start working on that or a few other small things. Coal site is something where you have the basic infrastructure ready. We all know basic infrastructure would comprise of the building part, the electricity connections, the systems would be in place, but then you have to make all the other arrangements. So coal site is obviously less costly, hot site would be more costly, and warm site is an intermediate arrangement between hot site and coal site. Then we have a reciprocal agreement also, where we have an arrangement of taking a backup at my friend's place, and my friend takes a backup at my place. So that's a reciprocal agreement. It cannot be relied on, and least costly, obviously, that is the advantage, but it cannot be relied on because as and when we require, probably that site may not be available. So least reliable, but less costly, and most reliable hot site, more costly. That's how you differentiate that. These are the exam question. But remember, these words are normally used in conjunction with other concepts also. So you need to know the terms, the correlation, and the differentiation between the different concepts of hot, warm, and cold. Okay, then we have the resiliency tools, friends. Again, certain terms which we need to know. These are certain technical terms, friends. Again, this comes inbuilt in certain questions from other topics also. So what is fault tolerance? Fault tolerance is the ability of the system to accept fault. Now we understand that fault tolerance should be low or high. So it should be high. We should be able to accept fault, right? And in spite of the fault, we should be able to work. So my fault tolerance should always be high. That's the resiliency measurement. That's how you measure yourself, your tolerance level is high. Now, how do you ensure that resiliency? How do you ensure that fault tolerance is high? So there could be different techniques of measurement. The one would be no single point of failure. Let's say our router is connected to different systems. So I would try to eliminate that single point of failure where if one router fails, my 5 system could get impacted. So I need to remove that single point of failure. Or I need to ensure that, if there's a fault in a particular instrument, that remains isolated. It does not propagate to other also. So that is how you remove this or increase your tolerance level. So these are certain techniques of building in resiliency tools, resiliency measurement within the whole system. So important term, fault tolerance. And remember one more word, mean time between failure, Mtbf, mean time between failure. That's also a very important term which has to be remembered from exam perspective. Mtbf, mean time between failure. That means what should be the time between 2 failures? What should be an ideal time, or not an ideal time, or time between 2 failures? Whether it should be high or low. Please ask this question to yourself and try to identify whether this mean time between failures should be high or low. Between 2 failures, what should be the time? Then certain terms which are there, again, with respect to BCP is about RAD, redundant area of inexpensive disks, where we take a backup of all my data into different disks, where we have a lot of disks which are inexpensive, not costly, and we keep on taking the backup. The only problem is that maybe we are taking that backup and keeping it on site only, the place where we are working, which should not be done. But then that is how you create the resiliency. That is the first technique. The second could be you taking a bulk backup of data, but then data is kept at offsite. That is known as electronic vaulting. That's another way. Remote journaling is another technique of taking a backup of all the logs. So we have electronic vaulting clubbed with remote journaling to create that full data backup. And remote mirroring is again live backup of the server. So again at a different site. So the best way obviously is remote mirroring, as a lot of organizations do have to ensure remote mirroring. So it depends upon your requirement, and these are the ways we try to building the resiliency part, friends, having a backup. And the last small angle is insurance, friends, which is a critical part of my BCP. So in spite of all the plans, working, testing done, we are perfect in everything. Still, there's a bit of imperfection always inbuilt in this whole universe, So to ensure that that imperfection does not disturbs my perfect way of doing things, that is why we take this insurance. And there are different types of insurance which could be taken. It could be the first party insurance, it could be third party insurance. We know the difference between these two types of insurance. But I think insurance should be properly planned because it has a cost. And the coverage, we need to ensure the coverage part, proper coverage, and all the terms, the conditions, the addresses, the locations are defined properly in the insurance agreements. So this was all about, friends, BCP in a quick snapshot as a summary, where we had covered various aspects, right from the basic concepts, terms, differentiation between the DRP and the BCP word, the inadequate risk of inadequate BCP, objectives of BCP, and then few important definitions. Then we covered in the next part the different phases of the development of the BCP plan and some important terms of ICAI, risk assessment, and so on. As I said in my earlier part when starting, that very scoring. So please focus on this. And I'm sure if you are able to crack around 70% of the 14 marks, probable 14 marks, which may be asked from this topic, then you have a high chances of getting nearer to the passing percentage. So that's all from my side. That was a brief coverage of this topic, small topic, and hopefully it will add value for your exam preparation. So thank you, everyone, and all the best. I think the next faculty is here, or?
Yes, Navinji, I'm here. Hello.
Okay, Mr. Narasimhan, please, you can take over. Right. Thank you. Right.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. Welcome, dear participants.
Just Mr. Narasimhan, are you the host or not? Just please ensure you are the host, because if I leave the meeting, it will
okay. No, I think.
So somebody from the institute needs to make.
Yeah, Maurya is the host. You may have to make me the co-host.
Maurya, please make Sir the host. Otherwise, if I leave the meeting, it will close. Yeah, so I'm leaving. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. You've made me the host. I would prefer if you just make me the co-host in case I have a bandwidth issue. It did happen a couple of times last time. So. I've done it. I've made you the host. Yeah, you can just make me the co-host. Participants will just start in a minute. We all know the challenges of information systems and technology as such, right? Okay. I'm just quickly sharing my screen, and I hope that is visible to all of you. Great. All right. Very good afternoon, my dear friends. Today we're going to discuss on what's the approach to DSA exam, and specific focus on tips and tricks where you can spend time and sort of crack this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through probably about 30 minutes we would have to discuss this sort of examination tips, what to do, what not to do. Immediately after which I have given a link for you to take up the mock exam, which is available, which will flash onto your screen or onto the portal a little later. And once that is over, we will keep about half an hour to discuss the mock test paper and where people may tend to go wrong. Okay, and there's just a simple, MCQ, which I thought I will keep it so that it becomes easier for you to, sort of we can discuss that. Okay, the first and foremost concept or the tip is understanding the marks weightage. Now, whenever you take up any course, there are two broad principles: studying for the sake of examination, studying it for knowledge. Studying for knowledge will eventually happen. There is no end to it. So as of now, the focus is only from examination perspective. So if you look into module 1 and 8, or you can just call it as module 1 with an extension, okay, it is basically the concepts, very fundamental concepts. The premier of information technology, emerging technologies, professional opportunities, correct? And there is a domain of emerging technology. Now this constitutes 20%. The second bucket is information system assurance services, which is focused purely on the auditing concepts, And this, my dear friends, focus on 13%. Then you have the third chapter, which many are of the view that, it's a little dry because of the heavy textual information. Quite possible, because you may not have practically implemented a few of them. It is quite possible. That constitutes around 13%. Then you have chapter 4, which is protection of information assets, extremely critical chapter, 20%. Okay, and then you have system development, acquisition, and maintenance. One unique thing about this chapter is it's an e-learning module. It was not taught in your or it was not discussed in your day-to-day conversations or sessions. But I'm sure during the DISA sessions, these concepts you would have discussed. I mean, the revisions. The sixth is a business application audit, which is 13%, and last is business continuity. Now, this is the typical way in which I suggest to prepare, and this is something which has been working out. If you see any paper for that matter, there is a lot of technological information, and there is also some bit of, I would probably call it as a management gap. You have a process, you have things on, SOP, people, trainings, etc. Now, if I take up the first chapter, it is purely focused on concepts. One might probably even get lost with the amount of technical information and knowledge, because that is the importance given as far as the first chapter is concerned. But if you slowly go to the second chapter, my dear friends, is the concepts of or basics of information system. Very critical from examination perspective, because the focus is entire thing as an IS auditor and not a traditional auditor. The purpose, the way in which you start thinking looks a little beyond. You no longer look for true and fair. You are looking mostly whether the information system assets, the controls, the risks, have they been addressed. Then obviously comes your chapter 3, which is on the governance component, clearly understanding the difference between the board, the management, the rules. Okay. Now, if you ask me from a preparation standpoint, I would say first chapter, prepare first. Concepts, you will be clear. Chapter 2, when you're reading, the moment you complete chapter 2, please jump into chapter 6. Why? Both of them speak from audit angle. Both of them have some sort of interdependencies, and it becomes easier for you to comprehend. And 26% of your, if you ask me, of the entire syllabus is focused on audit, which all of us have been, exposed in the last very many years. Please understand, while I'm speaking, the audience who are listening are multiple age groups. Correct? You may be, who are probably 45, 50, or even 60 plus.
Recording in progress.
May probably be even 45, 50, or 60 plus. Okay. And very interestingly, you may have not written examination in the last 5 to 10 years. There could be some people who have just recently qualified, and you may find this subject very easy. So it's a combination approach which we'll have to take. Okay, so chapter 2 and chapter 6 are interrelated. I recommend that you read them together. Now, chapter 3 is a governance oriented chapter. I'll give you a few key references. It becomes easier for you. Chapter 4 is a very large and examination, very important chapter. Okay, so you can decide how you want to schedule it. So ideally, my suggestion would be pick up chapter 1. Immediately after chapter 1, you may probably want to go combine chapter 2 and 6, finish it. Correct? But there is a logic why 6 is kept a little later, because you understand the way in which system is developed, and then you audit that system. Correct? So that is why the sequence. Or you can skip chapter 2 altogether, finish 1, go to 3, go to 4, 5, and then read 2 and 6 together. Okay, the choice is yours, but only one suggestion is 2 and 6, pick it up together. Okay, now, how do I understand what are the important topics? Where do people tend to make mistakes? And what are the approach which I have to consider? First, if you look into chapter number 1, which is Premier on Information Technology, Infrastructure, Emerging Technologies, the entire chapter is a fairly large and voluminous. It's a fairly large and voluminous. Okay, so please ensure you pick up, you have to go a little selective reading, but understand certain fundamentals. Components of information system. This is something which is very critical, and that's the fundamental thing. Components are hardware, software, data, network, and people. These are 5 broad components. Now, under each of them, there's a lot of discussion. Focus on that, get the concepts clear. Next, if you go focus on hardware itself, within that there are so many components, but one of the components which people often tend to make a mistake and forget is the concepts of memory, internal memory, external memory, virtual memory, cache memory, correct? Permanent memory or a temporary memory such as RAM. So you need to be very, very clear with these concepts. Virtual and cache is one of the options where people often tend to get confused. Third, what are the types of operating systems? What are the system softwares? The roles of operating systems, the functions, that is very critical. Expect MCQ questions. In fact, MCQ tips I'll speak about a little later. I'm focusing only on the topics. The concept of software acquisition and management to a limited extent is getting covered here. Some more portion gets covered as a part of your module 5, but here focus on that. Database is very critical. You have 3 to 4 types of database you'll be discussing: hierarchical database, network database, RDBMS, relational database, and then we'll be speaking about object-oriented database. So different types, what are the use cases where it can come into picture, very critical. And then comes a very interesting section on computer network types. You know, the transmission mode, the LAN topologies, network devices, topologies. My dear friends, this is a little technical and easy for you to score. For example, we have the concept of simplex, half duplex and duplex. You know, basically simplex like a TV, only one-way communication. I'm not talking about the smart TVs now, the traditional or the radio. Then we're talking about half duplex, something like walkie-talkie, or a duplex, which is, you know, both the ways. Correct? They can ask you practical questions on that. Or you can have types of network: LAN, WAN, MAN, client server, or peer-to-peer. Correct? So different ways in which networks are being classified. Then you have LAN topologies. When I say LAN topologies, there's basically mesh topology, highly useful where redundancy has to be maximum. Correct? In case of army and etc. Then we have a star topology, which is the most commonly used, like what we use in our offices. There's one central switch and everything is connected. Then you have a bus topology, which spreads for a very long distance and etc. Or you have the, you know, the ring topology, which is unidirectional. Correct? Then we also have the network devices and the components: network ID card. Correct? The switches, hub, router. These are very crucial terms. A hub sends it to everybody. It doesn't has any intelligence. Its purpose is only to send it to everybody. A simple example of a hub, put it in a non-technical parlance, is a power cord connector. So you have only one charging port. What you do, you pull an extension cord which has 3 or 4 slots, and all of them are getting equal power. Correct? So that's typically what a hub does. It just distributes to everybody. On the other end, switch is an intelligent. That's why we use it in our office. It decides which computer is placing the request. It's hub and switch. Then you have 2 other things. Hub and switch on one side. You have 2 other things. What are these 2 other things? Bridge and a router. Bridge connects 2 LANs over a short distance. A router connects 2 LANs over a long distance. Fundamental truth is this. You can have various other technical jargons. And a combination of both those, router. And not to forget, you have another interesting concept called as gateway, which has a unique thing which does protocol conversion: LAN to bus, bus to mesh, mesh to this, correct? Or, you know, different protocols being used in network. That can. Then you have the Osi Tcp model. Expect 1 or 2 questions minimum on this. Okay, the Osi 7-layer model. Okay, there is a memory code also which you can, you know, I'm sure you might have read. All people seem to need data processing. You know, these are all the layers. All people seem to need data processing. The layers basically, correct? And then you have the IP model, which is mapped from TCP. So if you read the OSI and then go to TCP, it becomes easier. Then securing the network, very critical. That firewall, types of firewall and types of IDs, so very important. In fact, this firewall and IDS types you will also notice in chapter 4. So you'll find, as and when you read, you'll find a lot of correlation between these topics. Then comes a very critical concept called cryptography, especially this public key. And cryptography is what? In layman's language, converting one form of text to another form of text. You know, on a very, very jovial note, way back in school, we used to have this fancy game where we used to write this alphabets, and each alphabet we used to write one number, and we used to send across the number so that nobody else is able to identify. That's a simple example of cryptography. We have much more advanced things which have come up. This cryptography is of 2 types. You know, what is called as public key is, of course, the biggest one which is being used. Correct? So these 2 terminologies which you have to be very, very clear. And of course, the digital signature, how a PKI is used in a digital signature. Of course, as I told, cryptography, there are 2 things: symmetric and asymmetric. Symmetric is I use the same key to lock and I use the same key to unlock. So I and you should have the same key. Only then I can send the message. Correct? But what is the risk? You already have the key. Correct? So which means if your system also gets attacked, anybody can read my message. That is a symmetric. Then you have asymmetric. Asymmetric, the entire focus is I use one key to lock it, another key to unlock it. Look at the beauty thing. I use one key to lock it, another key. The key to lock it is called private key. The key to unlock is called public key. And digital signature typically uses this. Okay, that's a cryptography. Then you have the last section where we speak of emerging technologies. Now here, emerging technology is the concept of data warehouse. Correct? That is one fancy terminology which has been come up. A warehouse is nothing but extracted version of the original data. See, when you are doing data analytics and a lot of analysis, business intelligence, you obviously do not do it on the primary system. Why? For obvious reason, your primary system will be loaded. Second, you don't want to take chances. And what if accidentally you push a huge command? You know, the production system, the others are also using. Imagine a case of a bank. So what do? You have an extracted version and you extract only certain fields. For example, it may be a Swiggy order or a Zomato order. It may not have every field, only certain critical things, the type of food, the veg or non-veg, the location, critical information you might need. And then you do analysis. The place where you pull it up is called as a data warehouse. Warehouse has got multiple components called as data mart. So for example, production comes into one data mart, sales comes into another data mart, purchases comes into another data mart, let's say inventory comes in. So all these data marts put together forms a collective warehouse. Then ERP, I think it's needless to say. E-commerce, again, we have been used to these terminologies. The concept of virtualization. Now, virtualization is nothing but, imagine a scenario. Physically, you had 4 computers in your office. Each of them had 10 GB storage or 100 GB storage. Effectively, if you see, it's 400 GB storage. But can you store a file worth 400 GB? The answer is no. Why? Because every system can store only up to 100. Now imagine I brought in a technology which is a virtual layer which can combine all these individual resources and brought it together. That is virtualization. Physically, you will have many. Virtually, you will have it as one. Reverse also is true. Virtually, you will have, virtually you may have just one. Physically, you may have many is what I said. Reverse is also possible. Correct? Physically, you just have one. Virtually, you may have many components. The virtualization expanded much larger and it became what is called as cloud. Cloud in layman's language is using somebody else's technology. Using somebody else's resources. It could be RAM, it could be storage, it could be memory, it could be an application, etc. In cloud, there are 2 things: deployment and service model. Deployment is private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud, community cloud. Broadly, these are 4 types. Service model is a very important IaaS, PaaS and SaaS. Infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And then you have mobile computing, and the latest thing which has come up or which has come into more prominence is BYOD. Considering this lockdown situation and work from home, etc., many of us have encouraged our employees to take their own assets, including their own personal laptops, because we do not have so many laptops in our premises. Correct? So that, my dear friends, is the gist of this high level. What are the critical components? I've not spoken about the entire chapter, please, that is not possible. And already the preceding faculties in the last couple of days have already done that. Let's quickly head into module 2. What is it from an IS assurance services? It is important. Now here, please bear in mind, this is 13%. First, understand the concept of IS audit and the differences. When I say differences, how IS audit is different from others. Now, this you are not expected to write theoretical questions because it's MCQ, but the way in which you start thinking will change. The perspective will change, because we cannot go with the same mindset of a tax auditor or a financial auditor. We need to see how the system works, for which you need to think what is the input, what is the processing, what is it. Please bear in mind the entire syllabus focus on risk. So technology risk, or that for that very matter, even if you start thinking on risk, it becomes easy. So what are the things? Concept of risk, concept of materiality. In a financial scenario, you might say materiality is based on an amount. In an IT scenario, it may be based on transaction volume, amount of memory consumption, amount of storage, correct? How many people are getting impacted? Am I carrying personal information, non-personal information? A lot of things are there, correct? Whether it's sensitive data, non-sensitive data, etc. And how do you focus on controls? So expect in this domain certain practical questions to come. Then you have what is called IS audit function and the rules. IS audit function and the rules. Now this, my dear friends, is again one more area where they can probably question you. Now, within IS audit functions, there could be multiple roles of auditors. Please be very clear. And remember one fundamental state, whenever you think any question speaks on IS auditor, the question will have one thing: which of the following cannot be performed by an IS auditor? The answer will be anything which focuses on implementation. I repeat, anything the IS auditor is doing, if it is relating to implementation, is a conflict. So IS auditor can never do. Don't say, no, sir, I will do it in some other company name, all those things. Let's exercise the maximum amount of independence. And always imagine you're auditing the largest of the organizations unless the question says otherwise. So you think that you're auditing companies like TCS, Wipro, Infosys, Microsoft, Accenture. Think on that mindset when you're answering any question. Correct? Next, audit charter. Very important. The scope and roles and contents of audit charter, who signs off the audit charter is very important. See, our audit charter, see, at the end of the day, a statutory audit comes by virtue of law, section 143. Correct? Read with so many other clauses. Typically, if it's a income tax, we say section 44AB. I'm not a tax and I'm not that sort of a practitioner, but I just, the basics I'm just trying to teach. But if you look from an audit charter, that is where the entire IS audit gets its purpose and scope. Wherever regulatory is there, that may also come in. That's a secondary. For example, insurance, you may have IRDA principles. Banking, you may have those. But generally, IS audit charter is very holistic. Planning, components of that. Scope, very important. How do you decide what is the scope? Correct? And regulatory. Now, this is something which is critical. Expect certain questions on this as well. Then this section moves on to speak on IT general controls to a limited extent. Concept of physical, environmental, logical. IT application controls, concept of boundary, input processing, all of those. Physical, again, we are going to touch upon in other chapters. I'll not make mention. Substantive testing, compliance testing, very, very, very important. You will find this covered in 3 chapters. Module 2, module, I think even module 6, and I think in module 4 also this makes a mention. Substantive testing and compliance testing. Compliance testing is test of transactions, my dear friends. It's always a test of, you have a transaction, you're just testing it. Test of transaction, simple. Test of a control, sorry, beg your pardon. Compliance testing is test of a control. You have a control, test whether that is being taken out. Layman's example, backup was to be taken daily. Just check whether the daily schedule is there. If there is a failure, what is to be done? Simple, that is a compliance. Substantive testing is test of transaction or test of the depth. You go into the utilities, you go into the features, where you go to such an extent or such a level that you may also want to go ahead and identify the root cause, why it happened. You may do a detailed introspection, investigation, etc. You may also probably alter the approach. For instance, a backup is taken, fantastic, but I want to verify whether the backup has been restored, what are the practices, correct? All this is substantive. Then you have 2 things, design versus operating effectiveness. Design is the overall structure. Operating effectiveness is testing whether the structure is working fine or not. A simple example, ATM does not have a security guard. ATM does not have a security guard. Design failure. ATM has a security guard, but he's most of the time not in the ATM for various reasons. Operating effectiveness failure. So there are 2 different things, correct? So if a control has been structured, but it is not working, then it is an effectiveness failure. If the control itself is faulty, or if the control itself is a failure, or if the control itself is not designed, then it's called, kept in place, that's called as a design. And last, you have a very small thing, IT-enabled services and value-added services which can come. As long as it is not contradicting to your independence and objectivity, it makes sense. Module 3, governance and management. Now, this, my dear friends, is a little tricky part. Why? Most of them, when are having a discussion with candidates, participants, they say a little dry for various reasons, because the vision and the perspective of this chapter is a little different. It looks at a very, very top-down approach from the governance and the management. In this entire chapter, understand what is the meaning of corporate governance, what is the meaning of enterprise governance. Very critical. Corporate governance is focusing on ensuring compliances, conformity, whereas enterprise governance is more larger. You have something called as, business performance. All of those gets covered. So corporate governance is a smaller part, enterprise governance, correct? Then you have sort of governance of enterprise IT. That is the overall governance structure in place. It could mean the way in which the board is overseeing it, the way in which the CIO, who's the highest level in the organization, is having a look into it, all of those. A simple rule of thumb you can keep in mind, this entire chapter, the first section at least, will speak of two things: governance, management. Governance will always do EDM, evaluate, direct, monitor. That's what you'll notice it. The management will always focus on APO, align, plan, organize. BA, build, acquire, implement. DSS, deliver, support, and service and support. And last, MIA, monitor, evaluate, and assess. So management, if you see, they are hands-on, whereas board is overlooking. Now, one can imagine probably, the Prime Minister or the Chief Minister's office as the governance, and the set of people below them, including the secretary, all these people as management, how they are executed. Now, next, you also have a very critical thing, COSO and COBIT. There are other small frameworks also, like 31,001 and 45,000 and things like that. Let's focus on two very important things, COSO and COBIT. Expect questions on this. COSO has got 5 components. COSO is basically a framework which is for entire internal control. Be very, very careful. COSO framework is very vast. It is focused on entire internal control. It is divided into 5 components, which you can look it up: control environment, risk assessment, information and communication, monitoring, and things like that. Yeah, so 5 components. And then you have 17 principles built with each of this. Okay. Of course, they may not test your memory, but practical application of that is something which may be looked at. As far as COBIT 5 is concerned, of course, now COBIT 2019 is come up, but since the DSA 2.0 syllabus, COBIT 5 is there. COBIT 5 is still applicable even now. It's not that 2019 has overwritten 5, you can still use it. So COBIT 5, it speaks of 5 principles. Very important. Understand those 5 principles and 7 enablers. 7 enablers. So these things, if you're able to remember, I think that becomes easier way for you to comprehend as far as module 3 is concerned. Then comes your risk management, like concepts like GRC, IT compliance review. You have something called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, SOX. You have something called internal financial controls under the India. Then you have clause 49. Of course, now it's called as a different nomenclature, but clause 49. So all these concepts are looked into. Then one very, very important thing in this chapter is the roles and responsibilities. Roles and responsibilities, especially the board, audit committee, are very important. Why do I say? You need to clearly understand who is to do what. Board, audit committee, steering committee. It is the committee which typically decides which is the projects where we have to prioritize and which you should not. And please bear in mind, steering committee is the highest authority for any sort of a project to drive it. Correct? Roles of DBA, security administrator, very, very important. If a security administrator accounts gets locked, or if there's a lot of password attempts on a security administrator's account, it indicates that there's a huge risk. One of the questions I remember, which of the following, while reviewing the logs, auditor found that there were a lot of failed attempts for a particular login ID and password. Which of the following category of users possesses the highest risk? The answer is security admin. If somebody is trying to jailbreak or try to get the security admin's login ID password, he can actually pose a huge amount of risk for the entire organization, because he is the guy who gives access to every other department, every other setup, and things like that. Correct? Then comes performance management. You have things like balance scorecard, the 4 components, COBIT 5, total quality management. So these are again a little lighter topics in the overall things. So whenever you read a topic, always look from an examination perspective. Understanding you have the lifetime to achieve it. Here, currently, the focus is only from examination. Quickly moving on to module 4, 20% weightage. Lot of technical concepts, especially the last 2 or 3 chapters, sub-modules or chapters, how you can call it. The first chapter predominantly focuses on management, risk management, and types of control. In fact, the focus there is on preventive, detective, corrective. Let me tell you, my dear friends, across your material, across the examination, you will have questions on PDC, directly or indirectly. For example, they can ask you, which of the following is a preventive control? Which of the following is detective? Which of the following is corrective? Easy. Which of the following is not a type of control? Preventive, detective, corrective, legal. That is also easy. You will have one more type of question where they'll give 3-4 options. They will not say preventive, detective. They'll say which one is the best. Out of the following, which is the best? There we have to be very, very careful. A control which is preventive will always be the best answer. Why? Because many a times in the DSA syllabus or the DSA examination, you will have multiple options or multiple answers which tend to be, I repeat, which tend to be the right answer. But how do I pick up out of that? Correct? So that is where this becomes very important. Preventive will always be better than any other. Next, information security management roles, types of policies and contents. This is important, especially the contents of information policy. You have something called user acceptance policy or acceptable usage policy. You have what is called internet or overall security policy, email policy. So what is the broad contents of each of them? So they can give you a statement and say which of the policies covers this in the detail and depth. Then obviously there's a concept of segregation of duties, rotation of duties, SOD, 4I principle. Those are purely from audit angle, you'll be able to answer. Again, one more place you'll find the roles and responsibilities. You found it in the previous chapter, module 3, you'll also find it in module 4, roles and responsibilities. Here, please be very clear with these 4 to 5 roles which I mentioned. User, it is you and I who are using a particular application software. It is our responsibility to protect the password. It is our responsibility to use it for a lawful purpose. So all of those are basic responsibilities. But then you have owner, custodian. I'll put in a very layman's language. Let's say you have a very valuable asset like a jewelry or a ring or something, which is valuable, and you decided to keep it in a bank. Now you are the owner of that asset, but you're keeping it in the bank. In whose custody it is? Bank. Banker is the custodian. Now tomorrow, if somebody comes and asks the custodian, boss, please give me access to that, can the custodian give it? The answer is no. Same way. In any organization, when you're trying to approach access to any IT resource, the custodian is the IT department. The custodian is the IT department. He's just holding it in custody. Who is the owner? The finance department or a proper within finance, assuming it's a procurement software, procurement department may be the owner. Correct? If it's related to marketing department. So the access should always be taken by owner's consent and not custodian's consent. Be very careful. There's one question which they twist and turn and ask. Then you have what is called administrator. Now, administrator, my dear friends, is always a person who has superior rights. Okay, you can also call it as a super user sort of this thing. He always has a superior rights. So whenever a person is having superior rights, what you should do? You should enforce there is additional control. You use what is called privileged identity management tools, or you regularly review them. There is a senior person who reviews it. So like that, there are controls. And last is HR security. HR security, starting from background verification, onboarding an employee, correct, giving the appropriate access, and very important, revoking the access when that person is leaving. So these are things which is very important. Correct? In fact, one of the questions says that which of the following is the best HR security policy? After the various options, one of the options is linking the user access along with the HR module. So the moment HR module have terminated access, all his access gets terminated. See, the legacy environment it used to work. Today, all startups, all these companies are using cloud. They use G Suite, they use all those things. So in all those cases, there are obviously some challenges. Now, some people use SSO, single sign-on, using one credential. If one time I'm able to authenticate, everywhere it gets authenticated. These things are also possible. Next, information classification, the purpose, the data protection, how information is classified, sensitive, non-sensitive, correct? What is the purpose of it? They ask you, what is the biggest objective of classifying the resources? The biggest purpose is, you know, which are critical so that higher amount of attention can be given to that, correct? Next comes the last section, which focus on risk, threat, exposure, control. I repeat, risk, threat, exposure, control. When I speak of these 4 things, risk, threat, exposure, controls, it is covering physical security, where as a person or as an object, somebody is able to steal it, take it away and things like that. Physical security. Environmental security, environmental factors, fire, climate, etc. And in fact, in this environment, one of the favorite question always is humidity and the relationship. Okay, I think one of the subsequent slides I plan to cover that. Then comes logical security. Logical security refers to a situation where digitally or through a computer system you are trying to access. It could be a server, it could be a folder, it could be a G drive, it could be a cloud, or for that matter, it could be something which is stored within your own PC, but there are multiple users in your PC and only those users have access. So all of those is your logical security. And last is network security over the network. So if you read these last 4 chapters or last 4 sections, of course, physical environment they've clubbed it, I think. If you look into that, you'll find all the topics. First, they'll speak on risks, threat, exposures, and then they'll focus on controls. It's very important. For example, network security, you focus on firewall. Logical security, you focus on user access. Environmental security, you focus on fire extinguisher, surge protectors. Physical security is focus on security guards, biometric, etc. So it is a bifurcation. And chapter 4 is a wonderful chapter. Lot of concepts is basically covered. Chapter 5. Fortunately or unfortunately, whatever you can call it, this chapter has been an e-learning module. So you might not have had time to interact with the faculty during the discussion. But be that as it may, it's an e-learning module, so which means even now you can go and pick up that e-learning, correct? So that's one advantage. Second, as far as this chapter, it talks about how one should implement, or how is the entire process of system development. The first section is focusing on the concept of SDLC, System Development Lifecycle. See, when you want a system, it is not that, oh, I go and bought the software and did it. No. I mean, for you at the end of the day, that may be for a smaller organization. If a larger company is coming, it's not so simple. Correct. Imagine building a whole new GST website, income tax website, TDS website, or ROC website, or for that matter, building a new income tax software for you, customized. You need to understand the requirements, get the resources, get the people, see whether it's feasible. A lot of things are getting out. And in this concept of SDLC, each phases is very important. And each of the phase, the role of IS auditor. Please be very careful. IS auditor will typically play a consulting role, or maximum just give a few suggestions, restricted to advisory, but he will not focus on implementation. Okay. Now this SDLC phases has got multiple things. The first is the feasibility. You have various steps. You know, we call it as legal feasibility, operational feasibility, schedule feasibility, behavior feasibility, time feasibility, correct? The resources feasibility. So there are different types. Those feasibility could be one question. Then you have what is called project management of SDLC. That's a huge role. Now, those of you who are involved in project management, or assuming you're executing a very large normal audit also, you will understand the role of project management, keeping people updated and things like that, roles and responsibilities. Then comes a very important section called Sdlc models. In fact, this entire Sdlc, if you ask me at a high level, it is all about the steps and the models. That's all. And some innovative things which comes in. So Sdlc models, you need to understand which model where you have to use. There is something called as a waterfall model. Very, very large projects, first time you're using it makes a lot of sense. Prototype, if you're building quite often and being able to do it, or give first a sample, and then if that is okay, then you build another prototype. Correct? Then you have spiral, which is very, very, keep on iterative, especially for large projects, it makes sense. Right? So like that, you'll have to ask. Then you have system acquisition. How do you acquire? Hardware, software, how do you build it, correct? And then comes a very important implementation and maintenance. In implementation, one of the important things, very critical, is types of testing. Unit testing, testing one small programmable part. And normally unit testing is done by the programmer themselves, whoever is doing the first line. Then you have what is called, once unit is tested, unit testing is nothing but, let us say, salary income chapter, income tax computation software you are designing. Only salary chapter you are testing, one small unit. House property you are testing, that's a small unit. Then you integrate both of them in testing, integration testing. Like for example, I understand under income tax laws under house property, you can set off against salary income up to whatever limit. So that is where integration testing comes. You are doing both the modules together. Then is regression testing, very interesting. You bought in a new change, or you bought in a new development to the system, but what was already working in your system stopped working. I'm sure many other times it happens, right? You brought in something new, you're very happy with the new feature, but earlier what was working, that stopped working. That's a regression test. And so there are various steps. Then you have implementation strategy. You have something called direct implementation, phased implementation, parallel implementation, and a lot of things, correct? So risk, advantage, disadvantage, all of those. Then you have what topic called SDLC and trends, concept of secure SDLC, virtualization. I think I already spoke of cloud, BYOD. As I told you, there are some amount of repetition. This makes it easier. And last is audit of SDLC. That's your module. Moving quickly, module 6, business application software audit. So how do I look into it? Now, this entire thing, my dear friends, is again a simple thing, simple chapter. I told you, please relate it in correlation with chapter 2, which is IS audit. Here, the focus of business model, process, and applications is very critical. It is the layer. First, your model will decide the process will decide the application. A big bazaar will not use the same model as Flipkart or Amazon for that. So model difference, process difference, application difference. And for all of this, you need to do what is called as a risk assessment. It starts with risk assessment. Risk assessment, again, go back to chapter 2, we have made a mention. Then comes application audit. This goes to the depth of application audit. Chapter 2 just makes a mention of application audits. Here we focus on this. Boundary. What is boundary? When two people are speaking with each other, two applications are speaking with each other, you a user and a hardware is speaking with each other, there is a change in environment, and that's about. Just like in a cricket, the ball goes outside that particular the row, we call it as a sixer or a boundary, right? Four. Quite similar to that. What operates within one, how it interacts with the other. You have encryption, password, PIN, etc. Then you have inputs, controls over data entry, controls over how checks and balances are there, whether the data is right, batch uploads and things. Then comes processing. What are the logic built in processing? What are the logic built in database? And then is output. Who has access to data? Who can view? Who cannot view, etc. Throughout this entire thing, you also have roles of auditors. Correct. Then comes a very incidental things. What are the steps involved in ICE audit? Usage of CAT tools. Correct. Interrelationship between CAT tools. Again, compliance testing and substandard testing. Very wonderful examples also being covered. Then what are the database controls, or what are the user controls over access, regulatory requirements. So all of these things are what module 6 is. Jumping to the last chapter, I think the previous faculty was just making mention of it. So again, I'm not going to go too much to concepts are very critical. Interrelationship. What is the, so you need to understand BCP, business continuity management, is a very, very large. Out of which one small thing is BC plan, business continuity, of which there is a smaller component called disaster recovery. Correct. And please bear in mind, business continuity has to commence much before disaster. It should not come in on that day. Oh, I will search where the fire extinguisher is. I will now update my telephone directory where the police have to call or ambulance have to call. That doesn't work. Correct. So the types interrelationship. Then there is a phase of BCP. There is a concept called incident. Incident handling is very important. When an incident becomes a disaster, that's also very critical. You need to understand that. The BCP manual, BCP policy, the concept of BIA, business impact analysis. You are analyzing every process within your organization and deciding for which you need to keep more resources, more people than the other, which is priority, which is not priority, which you can survive even if it is not working, which you cannot survive. So you need to make it very clear. That's a BIA. Then there's various things, backup types, incremental backup, differential backup, mirror backup, all of those. Then we're also talking about recovery, hot side, warm side, cold side, reciprocal arrangement. Correct. I'm not just mentioning of this because it was just spoken a few minutes back. Insurance type, third party, first party, second party. The concepts of data vaults, concept of RAID, redundant array of inexpensive disk. Multiple times it's getting stored in the same thing. And last is your audit of BCP. So my dear friends, I've tried to make a gist. And of course, in the last 30-40 minutes, I gave you, a very crisp overview of what each are critical things in each of these chapters and what they look at. So before I move into the next section, few things keep in mind. Whenever you're looking into the syllabus or content, the focus purely, my dear friends, is from examination, look from an MCQ. How to answer MCQ, strategies of that, I'm going to touch up a little later. What are the references material we should consider? First, the institute study material is the best. Do not go anything beyond that. In case you don't have the material, etc., you can just go to knowledgebank.icai.org. Just type for DISA material, you'll get it. DISA 2.0, please type it, you'll get it. It will come everything as various links. You pick up, it becomes easier. Okay, so you'll find all 7 materials, all of them. You have the DISA question bank again available in the same kb.ica.org. Also have mock test papers. This is again available with the institute portal. You can go pick it up. Anybody can download. You don't require any registration, etc. And of course, in addition, if you feel no, sir, I want something in a very gist form. Some concepts are not very clear. I want little elementary explanation, etc. There are wonderful, things which is available from our institute. This is available as a CA course subjects. For example, CA intermediate, you have what is called EIS, Enterprise Information System. Now, this enterprise information system, my dear friends, that link, whatever you've seen, you can probably take a snapshot, or you can just go search. You go to this ICAI website, Board of Studies, you will get this. Now, this has the entire EIS syllabus in probably about 30 pages. It's basically meant for revision. But as members, we also can go through it because it helps us to refresh various concepts. Some things may not be relevant, you can skip it. That if you compare with the DISA contents, you'll get it. Likewise, for IT, earlier, the old syllabus, it was called Information Technology. New syllabus of CA Inter, it is called as EIS. So that is the second link. CA Final, old syllabus, again had one subject called ISCA, Information Systems Control Audit. Again, you have a quick reference. Okay, ISCA and DISA syllabus have got at least about 60 to 80% easy way to compare. It becomes easier. And very interestingly, the institute recently has come up with MCQ and case study booklets for enterprise information systems. Now, this got a beautiful set of case studies and questions that can also be a good practice questions for you. Remember, there are 2 approaches in which you can prepare for exam. One is keep on reading the material. Second, practice a lot of mock test papers and MCQs. I would prefer you give equal weightage to both of them. Why? Because in every MCQ or every mock test, you also have the answers. Correct? So when you're reading it, there is also a justification why A is the answer, why B and C are not. So you're also getting to know a lot more things, and it's become very concise and crisp. So that way also you can look into it. Few general tips. First, the entire paper structure, if you see, the entire paper, or if you say, as I kept on repeating, there are technical concepts, there is general management. For example, if you look into chapter 1, lot of technical concepts. You need to spend a lot of time there. Chapter 4, lot of technical concepts. Whereas there's a lot of general management can within that. For example, if you look into chapter 3 or module 3, governance, for roles and responsibilities, advantages. So all those things, my dear friends, here the extended common sense brings a lot of advantage for us. Just imagine that it came up to a situation like you were the head of the organization, you had to take a decision. And remember, you are working in a very large organization. It has no budget constraints, no resource constraints, unless the question clearly specifies. A few basic tips. Mind is very important, because normally a chain, I keep on saying, a chain is as strong as the weakest link. You often think that, oh, technology is so complicated, income tax I can understand, GST I can understand, technology I can understand. It's just an extended, we have to put in a little bit of effort. And the best part is we are using this daily. That's why I keep on saying it's an extended form of common sense. And being in an IT era, all of you should be able to pass. It's not complicated at all. Just that little bit of push and the way in which you think should be important. And of course, have a watch over time, because sometimes you tend to get carried away, correct? But since it's going to be an OMR based, I'm sure you will have enough time. I think close to about 3 hours or 4 hours at the exam time. I'm sure you'll be able to finish it. One small suggestion: do not answer or put a tick mark on the question paper and then come back to the OMR. As and when you are done, please keep on circling the OMR sheet, because oftentimes that's a little frustrating exercise. I personally do not recommend it. Leave it to your best wisdom. And second, in case a question you do not know, you have left it, be very careful in the OMR sheet, because question 3 you do not know, you jump to question 4. But many times in our absent-mindedness or whatever, in that lost in the thought process, because we are very excited that I know the answer for question 4, we will go and write in OMR 1 and 2 is colored, 3rd is not colored, so we'll go and color that. Okay, so be very, very careful, be a little cautious when it comes to all this. A few other basic tips for each chapter: understand the purpose, make a logical conclusion why that is there. Try to relate. This is something which I always recommend. Try to relate the topic with your day-to-day experiences. Beg your pardon. It could be something relating to what you see with your client, what you see in your organization. You went for a site visit as an intern. You saw a movie. Try to relate it to a movie. All of those. For example, I relate Worm Attack with that of one of these fancy fiction movies where a lot of robots were created by one other robot and it was attacked. Correct? That's a worm attack. Correct? So read the summary after every chapter. That gives you a quick gist. And there is also, this may be a little old school method, but it makes sense. Especially confusing words, please write and practice. It becomes a quick reference. Few special strategies. First, after preparing every chapter, I would suggest prepare a high level summary. It could be just a small chart. Okay, this is the chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A simple summary. Okay, read the glossary. There is some document available called Glossary of Terms with the ICAI itself. You can go download it. That is available. Please pick it up and read it. Read the heading or sentence prior to the bullet point. This is a pro tip. This one of my student, told me that she was making a mention, sir. I started following this strategy. Makes a lot of sense, because any MCQ question, 3 or 4 options will be there. Anything which is prior to the 3 or 4 option, read that question. And very important, wherever in your entire ICA material you find 3 bullet points or 4 bullet points, remember that will be an MCQ question, because 4 options you have. If it is 3 bullet point, one of the option, these will be the 3 options, another 4th option, something random will be that will be the answer. Example, which of the following is not a type of control? Physical, logical, network, let us say topological. Topological is the answer. These 3 are given, correct? So that way it becomes easier for you to relate. So this is an example of a chapter overview. For example, information system, components, control, audit tricks. But this just gives you a bird's eye view. You know where you have to spend a little more and where you have to spend. So let's get back to the drawing board and do some bit of exercise. I know, put in 3 to 1 week of hard work dedicatedly. I'm sure all of you will be able to crack it. Okay. Now MCQ. Now answering MCQs itself is an art by itself. Correct? So if you look into every MCQ scenario, there will always be a stem in the question. What is the core thing they're looking at? And then you will have distractors and correct answers and etc. Normally out of 4 answers, 4 options, beg your pardon, 4 options. One obviously is the right answer. One will be a very, very close but a confusing answer. Or sometimes it will be an exact opposite answer. The other two could be a distractor. So removing these both is often easy. Choosing between these both comes only by practice. Practice of not writing many exams, but practicing before your one main exam. Correct? So STEM refers to the body, the distractors, and obviously you have the correct. A simple, very, very crude way of saying what is the color of the sky. The core STEM is you're focusing on the color. And then you have the various answer options, and then you have the correct answer. Now, when you answer an MCQ, remember a few fundamental things. There is always go by a best answer approach. Because many times you will read all the answers are correct. I repeat, you will read all the answers are correct, but you have to choose the best answer. Correct? Second, there are many questions where you focus on analogy type. Now, what is analogy type? There is a relationship between A and B, C and D, X and Y. A simple example. Higher the humidity, higher is the corrosion. Lesser the humidity, higher is the static electricity. That is the fundamental approach. Now they can twist and turn these four things and they can ask you various types. Analogy type. Then is reserve type. Very, very, very important. Oftentimes we make mistake here. Why? Because in this reserve type, it is a negative word. Which of the following is not a type? And that not will be a normal alphabet. It will not be capital, etc. In our mind, we have to capitalize that. Because oftentimes we have become so very positive in our life that we tend to misreading that word. So please read every word in the question carefully. Now it may sound a little childish, but even now when I write my MCQ exams, I keep on reading, I keep on taking a lot of exams and courses. Even now when I take up anything, I take a pencil and keep it word by word. Why? That small one word you miss out. Correct? Reserve it. And last, obviously, there's only one correct answer. You have to deduce the relationship amongst various options and then look into it. Correct? And in MCQ, it is not just your your theoretical knowledge, is also application is something which is going to come up. Certain few strategies. First, read the question completely. Oftentimes, first part of the question, last part of the question, there will be some sort of a dichotomy or a difference. So you need to get a very, very clear. Second, think of that. What could be the answer for that scenario? Oh, if this is the case, this is what is the scenario. In that case, it becomes easy for you, provided you know what is the approach. If you don't know what the approach, eliminate the wrong answer. Nahi hai, nahi hai, nahi hai, ye to sahi hai. Correct? So you try that. Remove all of them, land up with the rest. Use the process of elimination. I keep on telling this. Use the process of elimination. Correct? If you do not know, remove those options, you will land up with those. Select the best answer. Always choose the best answer. In fact, there'll be certain critical words: major, maximum, highest, best, least, not. These are all important words in the question you have to understand. Okay. And the second point which you notice on the screen is very crucial. Read every answer option. Why? You would have thought the best answer is option 2, only to realize a little later there's an option C or option 3 which is much better than the option 2. Correct? Answer the questions you know first. I don't think this we spoke of. Make an educated guess. I'll show you each of these what is that with one example. I'll show you. You'll get a perfect understanding. Sample questions. Few sample questions. This is not for you to answer now. This is for you to understand the mindset. This is for you to understand the mindset. So before I go to this, quickly to recap. As I told you, MCQs focus on 3 to 4 bullet points wherever is there in the material. A preventive option is always better than a detective or a corrective option. Correct? And as I told you, think that you are auditing the largest of the organization. Don't think of a small organization. You're auditing the largest of the organization. And more importantly, when you're auditing the largest of the organization, think that there are separate people for various departments. You are not going to do everything. Correct? So if you think on that mindset, it becomes easier. And not to forget, look at the keywords in the question: not, cannot, shall not, or for that matter, best, least, minimum, maximum. These are all critical words. Let's look into these questions. These are only sample questions, and of course there's just a one-way communication because it's a webcast. You can look into it, apply it in your mind. I'll be able to share what the experiences are, and of course the link for the filling up the mock exam is already given in the window. Hear me out completely, because I'm there only for a few more minutes. The mock exam link is going to be there for some more time, and then you can pick it up. Sample questions. During an audit of financial transactions of XYZ, it was found that simple errors of data were occurring. There was an error occurring when two digits, either individual or part of a larger sequence, were reversed while posting the entry. What is the type of an entry? First, let us understand the question. Question says, you are auditing a financial transaction of a company. There were errors, okay. But when these errors occurred, either individually or part of a larger sequence, there is individually one or two, or a larger sequence. When these things are sort of getting interchanged, what is the type of error? Now let's simply use the elimination approach. You don't know what it is, let us use an elimination approach. Of course, you know the answer, directly punch in. Let's use the elimination approach. First, what is addition error? You are entering 48. You entered 448. What number came next? Truncation is what? Reverse. 448 you have to enter, you entered only 48 because one time you hit it, accidentally the keyboard didn't hit through what? Then you have so that means these both are not the answers, so removed. So I told you, distract as remove. Then you have close to the answer, substitution, transposition. Substitution is every time you hit one alphabet, instead of that you hit another alphabet. Classical example, it happens. Normally we are typing the keyboard. This is alphabet A, S, D, F. Keyboard. Those of you, we use the typing, right? A, S, D, F. Accidentally, I kept my keyboard in the next. I didn't keep it on A. I kept, so this becomes S, this becomes D, this becomes F, and this becomes G. And when you start typing, you actually are thinking in your mind that this is A, whereas you are actually hitting S. Simple example, it happens. I mean, you will not realize after you have typed the entire paragraph. You will quickly realize it. Yes or no? That is a substitution error. You just realize that every alphabet you're replacing with something else. Is that the case? The answer is yes. No. You're substituting, you're interchanging. The word is reversed. The word reversed in the question is important. The answer is transposition. Let's look into question 2. Now, this is a question you might suddenly feel, hey, this is coming out of the world. I have not even read this concept. What are the controls that are responsible for maintaining chronology of events from the time sender dispatches till the time receiver obtains? No, you have not heard this at all. You are thinking of using elimination approach, but for eliminating also you should know what you should not eliminate, right? Now this is where educated guess and common sense comes. Look into the question, what is those 3 or 4 important words which is there? They're talking about a control which is responsible, and they speak about chronology, and they speak about 2 things, sender, receiver. Right from the initial time when we learned Indian Contract Act, we learned communication is complete as against the sender, as against the receiver. We learned all of those things. What are we speaking about? Communication. The answer is communication control. Stop it. So do not overthink. Do not overthink. Oftentimes we think so much that our first option would have been right. Correct? We overthink. Be very, very pragmatic and relax. It's just an examination. Be relaxed. Okay. Next, X entered into a contract with Mr. Y for purchase of household products via online stores, e-commerce. Okay, on cash on delivery. So the mode is COD. As per the terms, it was supposed to be delivered within 3 days of the order placed. The delivery was made on the 4th day, and X said that he will not perform the contract. Now, this is a risk. Yes, it is a risk. Is it risk associated with which type? Now, this is where I am reiterating, read every option. Read every option. Now, let us say this is how you are writing the answer. Risk associated with control. What is the control here? There is no controller. There is no controller. See, there is a risk. For that risk, I will keep a control. Correct? So here there is no control at all. So therefore, that option doesn't come. Risk arising with security? No, that will not come. But risk associated with transaction? Yes, it's a risk associated with transaction. I agree. But please be very careful. I want to go for a focused specific answer. This is a risk associated with e-commerce than of the transaction. No doubt that is a transaction, but what is the most specific answer? E-commerce. So the answer is option D. Okay, you can expect questions like this. Arrange in chronological order of their assessment, A, B, C, D, B, C, D, A, D, A, whatever. Risk, threat, vulnerability. This just to give you an example what it can be possible. And this is something which is completely, you will feel, hey, what are they asking this question? I don't even know which chapter, what subject I'm reading. Look at this. Best definition to define a human being in terms of system. Hey, what is this here? It looks like rocket science for me. what is a human being doing in information system? Am I doing biology? Hang on, forget all those things. Look into the options. You'll find a pattern in the options. Physical, 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 probabilistic, probabilistic. That means human being is physical and probabilistic. Concluded. Manual, manual, automatic, manual. 3 times repeated, which is the one which is least repeated. Normally is not the answer. Blind rule. Or is human being automatic? No, he's a man. He's a manual system, right? He's a manual system. It's not that he can do things automatically. So he's physical. He or she is physical, probabilistic, or manual. Now is open or closed? How do I decide? Human being. What is the meaning of open system and closed system? Closed system does not interact with any other calculator. Open system interacts with everybody. You, your computer, your business, etc. So therefore, a human being is physical, probabilistic, manual, as well as closed and open. The answer is option B. And this is my personal favorite. Before we move on to the last section, one very, very nice question. A business continuity plan includes various plans to be prepared. This include emergency plan, backup plan, recovery plan, test plan. So 4 plans, they themselves are. Now, BCP as a process has to start before disaster, correct? It has to start before, they themselves say. And all plans, I repeat, all plans are drafted document before the disaster. All these 4 plans, they are themselves are saying it's documented before the disaster. Now, which out of these 4, which is the major part executed before the disaster? Look at that last crux of the question is that last line. Out of all the 4 plans, which is the major you will execute before the disaster occurs? Now, first, understand what is an emergency plan. Emergency plan is the moment emergency takes place, there is an alarm, there is a fire. What you need to do immediately is an emergency plan. So, all the detailed steps will be done after the disaster occurs. Just one small guide on what you're supposed to do, awareness will be done before. Okay. Backup. Will you take a backup before disaster or after disaster? Obviously before the disaster. Obviously before the disaster. Yes or no? When you're taking the backup before the disaster, that means major part is done before. That means anywhere backup is there, that could be the answer. Next, recovery. When will you recover? After everything is lost. Or if there's an attack, if there's a disaster. That means when it starts subsequently. Last comes test. When will you test it? Will you test after the disaster occurs? No, you have to test much before. So the answer is backup and test. Option C, backup and test. That will happen major executed before the disaster. So I hope all of you have got a clarity on this. One last question I've not mentioned it, perhaps I missed it. One very, very popular question which keeps coming, and generally people often tend to make mistakes. This is where you have to start thinking. The conceptual understanding is very clear. Taking backup is a preventive control, detective control, corrective control, some other. Forget it. Let's say keep only 3 options. Backup. Is it preventive, detective, corrective? Majority of them answer backup is a preventive control. The answer is no. Backup is a corrective control. Why? By you taking backup, are you preventing an attack from taking place? No. By you taking a backup, if there is an attack, you know you have a corrective control restoring. I repeat my statement. By you taking backup, can I say there's no attack is never going to happen? No. Even if an attack happens, I know how to restore it. That is the most important thing. So backup is always a corrective control. Small twist. Verifying whether the data has backed up correctly by performing certain technological control checks, cyclical redundancy checks, CRC, whatever, is a detective control, because you are verifying whether the backup is done. Anything relating to verify, audit, examination, review is always detective. Okay, so I think fundamentals are clear. So my concluding remarks, as I keep on saying, a chain is as strong as its weakest link. A chain is as strong as its weakest link. So please bear in mind that this subject or this topics are equally, every chapter is equally important, because we also spoke of that, marks weightage. Right? So keep calm. The CA exam or the DSA examination is not a storm. You already sailed through one major exam, right? All of us are already fellow professionals. So this is just an add-on. I'm sure you'll be able to crack it. Right? I think it's time you get started. You have a short span of time for another couple of weeks, a week or so. Spend adequately, and I'm sure you'll all come up with flying colors. Okay, so these are my contact coordinates. I'll be happy to sort of discuss and clarify, and be in touch with you. I'm available over LinkedIn. We can always be in touch over that. Okay, the link for the mock test is also pushed onto the website. Those of you, if you see the website where the webcast is, on the right hand side you will find it. Okay, on the right hand side you'll find the webcast link. So what we're going to do is, it is 3 o'clock now. I'm going to give you 30 minutes. 3:30, all of us are going to, by 3:30, all of us are going to finish the mock test, probably take a quick bio break. 3:30, I will discuss the question paper, or whatever I've given, and so that we are able to understand where we went wrong and how we can get better. Okay, so until 3:30, this session will be, I will give you time to go ahead and take the mock test. I would have switched off my video and audio just for the interest of bandwidth and conserving this thing. So the mock test, 3 to 3:30 is the mock test. The link of the mock test is either here, what you see on the screen, you have to type it, or if you're hearing in the webcast, towards your right hand side, you will find a small place where it says link by Narsaman Ilambon. Please click that, it will take you to the mock test. All right, friends, I hope you had a good 30 minutes to answer it. We are going to quickly discuss this answers for this mock test. And of course, this is purely to understand your conceptual knowledge and for you to reassess where you stand. The responses obviously is, whatever you're filled in, I think a copy of that would have gone to your mailbox already. So let's quickly spend some time. I understand close to about 100 plus people have already started answering this. Yeah. Little more than 100 in fact. So many of them have already started submitting your answers and the next part of the discussion. So what I'm going to do now is I will quickly take you through the answers and I also give you the logic why any of those would be the answer. An IS auditor is reviewing the access to application, determine whether the 10 most recent, the 10 most recent new user forms were correctly authorized. So what is a user form? Basically a control. I mean, amongst the various other things, it's a control. So when it's an internal control, what happens? You're testing it. So that means you're doing a compliance test. Okay, variable sampling, all these things do not apply. Explanation is any which case given here. I'll focus more on because we have about 30 minutes we have to discuss it. Next, the decision and action of an IS auditor are most likely to affect which of the following risk. Whenever an auditor performs any exercise, the focus is on the detection risk. The focus is on the detection risk. So first question, most of you have answered it right. I'm just trying to navigate through the answers as well. Just give me a minute. Yeah. So the first question, as I see, the first question, most of you have answered it is right. Compliance testing and variable sampling. All of these are specific cases used in different scenarios. Okay, so quickly moving to the second part, I told you it's a detection risk. Auditor always has the major thing which is to do with detection risk. Third, which of the following is a substantive test? Checking list of exception reports, ensuring approval for parameter changes, using a statistical sample to inventory the tape library, reviewing password history. So if you notice 1A, B, and C, all of these are compliance oriented and they are not statistical or they are not with relating to substantive. Okay, so I think again close to 50% have answered this question right. I am seeing about the 135 odd respondents as of now. Okay, quickly moving on to fourth question. The use of statistical sampling procedures helps to minimize what? The answer is obviously detection risk. The probability of you getting that particular scenario, and the answer is B. Again, 44% have answered this right. A good portion of them have answered sampling risk. So please be very, very careful. Sampling procedure cannot minimize sampling risk. So understand what is a sampling risk, because many of you have answered wrong. I thought I'll clarify this. A sampling risk is you are out of, let us say you have picked up about 1,000 samples, 1,000 is your population, of which you picked up 100, or even you picked up 15, or even 10%, whatever the ratio you picked up. There is a possibility that the sample does not represent the overall population. That is sampling risk. The risk that the sample does not represent the overall population is sampling risk. So most of you have gone wrong in fourth question. 44% roughly have gone wrong. No problem. It's always a learning experience. Question 5. Which of the following is a benefit of risk-based audit planning? I think 96% of you have answered this right. Resources are allocated to the area of highest concern, which is obvious, which is your priority. That is where you're focusing. Question 6, an IS auditor conducting a review of software usage and licensing discovers numerous PCs contain unauthorized software. He discovers, okay, which of the following should the IS auditor take? Okay, and always look at what should be done immediately. Close to about 86% of you have answered it as report the use of unauthorized software and the need to prevent the audit management, which is right. Okay, so the next often confused is or area where you have probably mentioned is inform the audit of unauthorized software and follow up for confirm of deletion. Now, if you are informing, you're not doing anything. Okay, so you need to report it. Okay, so please be very careful with the roles and responsibilities. Okay. Next comes audit charter. I think I made a mention. Audit charter is an important question. An audit charter should, okay, by dynamic change often? No. clearly state the objectives for delegation of authority, document, overline the overall authority. So answer is option D, overline the overall authority. Okay, so that should be your answer. A few of them, again, there is some sort of a confusion between these options, but nevertheless, it's good. Next, eighth, the major advantage of a risk assessment approach over baseline approach. Okay, so here again, I think most of you have answered it right. Appropriate levels of protection are applied to information assets. Close to about major portion have done written it right. Let's quickly go to the ninth. Which of the following sampling methods is most useful when you test it for compliance? Okay, and when you're doing compliance, it is always attribute sampling. Okay, attribute sampling is useful for compliance. Again, most of you, close to about 70% have answered it right. Variable sampling, you do not use it for compliance. Please be careful with that. Okay, and quickly moving, of course, all of them are used for substantive testing. Okay. See, attribute sampling is whether a particular attribute is there in the population. So every population you see whether that attribute, that means what? You're checking the control. Okay. Question number 10. An IS auditor is assigned to perform a post-implementation review of an application system. Is not post-implementation. Which of the following situation may have impaired his independence? Expect questions on impairing independence, I told you. The answer is implement a specific control during the development of application. If it is implemented, that will have an impact. So I think 10 has been a little mixed bag. Please note, if he does anything relating to implementation, it is directly impacting him. I repeat, anything relating to implementation, it directly impacts him. So that is something which you have to be very, very careful, and please take care of that. Okay. Quickly moving to question number 11. 11, as I see, it's been a very, very mixed response. Which of the following tests is an IS auditor performing when sample of programs is selected to determine if the source and the object versions are the same? So you test what is called as the compliance. Please note here, it is not a substantive, it is a compliance, because you are performing a sample of programs to select whether the source and the object is same. That means you're checking the controls, correct? So obviously it is a compliance test. And you're doing a compliance test on what? On the library controls, because the library is where this becomes as a repository. Okay, so this question has had a divergent answer. Okay, yes. 12th, the primary purpose of an audit trail is to establish accountability, and that's the most important thing. I think most of you have got it right. Many of them also suggested that, provide useful information to auditors who may wish to track the transactions. My dear friends, please note primary, the keyword primary is very important. Okay, next. 13, an IS auditor is evaluating a corporate network for possible penetration by employees. Which of the following would be a greatest risk? Okay, so the answer again here would be many user IDs have identical passwords. So which means your user ID, my user ID, password is same. So there is obviously a huge potential for it to be a misnomer. Some of them have said there are number of external modems connected to the network, so that doesn't matter. User can install software on the desktop, that is okay, but these are not critical things from a highest point of view. Okay, quickly moving to the 14th. I hope now you're able to understand, get the mindset. Okay, this is how I have to look into, this is what I need to do. 14, which of the following should be the most concern for an IS auditor reviewing business continuity plan, BCP? Okay, the responsibility for declaring disaster is not identified. That is the answer. And this again, I think let me quickly see, only 36% have identified it, right? Many of them have said that overall BCP is document, but detailed recovery steps are not specified. That is okay, but this I think will become more important, the responsibility for declaring disaster. Now, when do you call a disaster? That is the most important. This is good. Option C, most of you have answered, but it is not option C, it is option D. It is okay to call, it is okay to have some overall BCP. Okay, detailed step not specified is okay. But I don't even know when there is a disaster, right? So when there is no disaster, it becomes a complete miss. Right? So 14th, I think many of you have got it wrong. So please be a little careful on 14th. 15th, a hot strike should be implemented as a recovery strategy when the disaster tolerance is low. Okay, when the disaster tolerance is low. 15, the answer is A. Again, I think good number of people have answered right. 50% have answered right. Rest of them has slightly tweaked. I understand about 175 people have roughly answered now. and keep it going. Even if you're finishing the last part of it, no problem, finish it and probably relook into it, or pause and come back however you want, I would say. Let's quickly go to question number 16. Develop a successful business continuity plan. End user involvement is critical during which of the following phases? The answer is BIA, because business impact analysis is the most critical exercise. Okay, so I think majority of them have answered it right. 42%. 27% of you have said testing and maintenance. I'm sorry, my dear friends, user department does not come in testing and maintenance. And again, 22% have answered detailed plan development. No, this all happens much later. The first thing which is priority is a business impact analysis. Question number 17. Which of the following would have the highest priority in business continuity plan? Again, here it is resuming critical operations, and I think 71% have answered it right. A good portion of them have answered relocating operations to an alternative site. No doubt this is important, but this is the highest. Okay, and in fact, as a part of resuming critical process, maybe relocating to alternate plan could be an answer. Okay, so please be very careful. There is a best answer which you have to always choose. Let's quickly go to question number 18. Question number 18 is a DRP for an organization's financial system specifies the recovery point objective is no data loss and recovery time objective is 72 hours. Which of the following is the most cost-effective solution? This is where it is application oriented. Here, answer is synchronous remote copy of data in a warm site that can be operational within 42 hours. Please get the concept right. Recovery point is how much of a data loss prior to the attack I can withstand. So I can, please note, RPO is 0. There is no RPO, correct? That means you need to ensure data is always kept. So therefore synchronous remote copy makes sense. But recovery time objective is 72 hours. That means after the disaster, within 72 hours I can be up. So here it is only 48 hours. So therefore it works. So answer is 18B. I think 50% only have answered it right. Rest all of them have got a little different this thing. So please be a little careful here. Hot site that can be operational in 8 hours with asynchronous backup. Please note it is the most cost effective. Please understand this. Most cost effective, that is the key word. Okay. Option A is good, but it is expensive. Option A is good, but it is expensive. Considering I want cost effective solution, as I kept on saying, until unless the question requires otherwise, please look from a big view. Question number 19. I hope you're able to understand where you went wrong, where you're making those, where you can get. Which of the following represents greatest risk created by reciprocal arrangement? I think answer is very simple: hardware and software compatibility issues, because most of the time I'm using a different hardware, you're using this thing. The resources may not be available, which is okay. Recovery plan cannot be tested, all of them are okay. The best answer would be hardware and software incompatibility. The other plans, again, here I find it's sort of equally distributed. The answer would be to do with hardware and software compatibility, which is option A, which I'm noticing only about not 29% only have answered it. Okay. Question number 20. Which of the following procedure would best determine whether adequate recovery restart procedure exists? Okay. So here it is reviewing operations document. Now why? Now why operations document? Please bear in mind operations document is one such document where detailed step-by-step procedure is mentioned. Okay. So therefore reviewing operational document would be the answer, which is option B, and not program documentation. Many of them have got confused. Program documentation is how the programs have been written. Operational documentation is how the day-to-day exercise also is being mentioned. So that is where people have gone wrong, and that is where this can be a good example. 21, an investment advisor emails periodical newsletters to clients. Very good question. And wants reasonable assurance that no one has modified the newsletter. The objective can be achieved by what? Encrypting the hash of newsletter using the advisor's private key. Okay, so answer will be 21A. Again, here it's been divergent answer. 36% have answered it right. Many of them have gone mentioned it incorrectly. Encrypting the hash of newsletter using advisor's public key will not be a thing. Digitally signing the document using advisor's private key. Again, 21C, also many of them have given it. The answer will be encrypting the hash. Digitally signing the document is okay, but here I want to ensure double check, using the private key, I'm sort of, using that. Question number 22. Which of the following is a passive attack to the network? Again, distributed answer. The answer here is what is called as traffic analysis. 30% only have answered it. What is traffic analysis? You are just analyzing the data. What is passive attack? You're not doing anything hands-on. You're just keeping your hands and just watching it. Okay. Message modification is not passive; it's active. Masquerading is impersonating. Denial of service, again, we use active attack. Next is 23. Sending a message and message has encrypted by the sender's private key will ensure authenticity and integrity. 23 answer will be A. Okay, authenticity, which again close to 50% have answered it right. I understand some more people are updating or making the submissions, no problem. So this answer to question number 23 will be authenticity and integrity. Now, why not privacy? Privacy is nowhere. Please note, privacy is something which is not achieved by a PKI. It uses altogether different this thing. So wherever you have privacy, that will not be the answer. 24. Which of the following anti-spam filtering technique would best prevent a valid variable email message containing heavy weighted spam keyword from being labeled as spam? This is a very nice question. It's an application oriented question. Now 24, this is where a statistical model will be the answer. The answer is option D. Again, only 1/4 of the population have given it right, and many of them have said it's a heuristic. Why? See, please bear in mind, it is something which has to be done, which is variable length. Okay, please look at this. It is a variable length email. If it's a fixed length email, then it makes sense for you to go for a rule based. It's a variable length. Okay, and it's heavily weighted. There are certain spam keywords, correct? So here you use what is called as the Bayesian, which is the statistical model. Next is 25. I think by now you would have realized we are almost 50% through. You would have now understood what is your level of preparation as well, which is good, and that is the whole purpose of this mock test. A public key infrastructure, a registration authority, what does he do? He verifies information supplied by the subject requesting a certificate. So his role is more to do with the verification part of it. Okay, so that's 25. And just for information, registration authority is nothing but to whom you actually register, and from them you get it. In India, you have what is called CCA, Controller of Certifying Authorities, who acts as a registration authority. Then you have 26. Which of the following methods of suppressing fire in the data center is most effective and very important, environmental friendly? Okay, so most effective would be a dry. A wet sprinkler is not suggested at all. So dry would be your answer. Again, majority have answered it. Many of them have said wet sprinkler, and some of them have said halon gas. Halon gas is prohibited. Halon gas is prohibited. So please note, environmental friendly also is a requirement. Quickly moving further, 27. Which of the following ensures a sender's authenticity and email confidentiality? So that's question number 27. Okay, I understand about close to about 200 people have answered this MCQ. I'm really glad that you're making use of this. Which of the following ensures sender's authenticity and emails confidentiality? Look at those two words, emails confidentiality. Now this is where I told you it's a logic oriented question. Here the answer is encrypting, option C. Again, here I'm noticing all the answers are uniformly dispersed. So here the answer is encrypting the hash of message with sender's private key. So please understand, private key will again, so it looks like PK infrastructure, most of you have to revisit, so please spend some time on it. Sender's private key, I repeat, sender's private key is always used to ensure authenticity, that I only have signed it. Private key is where, assuming I am signing it, right? So private key is where I get the signature. And email confidentiality, what you do for confidentiality, I know that only you should get a copy of it. So therefore, I'm encrypting with your public key. So I will not have your private key. So the only thing I can encrypt is your public key. So answer will be option C, encrypting the hash of the message with sender's private key and also adding a layer of receiver's public key. Next is 28. A manufacturer has been purchasing raw materials from his business through e-commerce application. Which of the following should this manufacturer rely on to prove the transactions were actually made? It is non-repudiation. Non-repudiation refers to a scenario where you cannot reverse or you cannot undo a particular thing done on a digital platform. Again, 50% plus or a good portion of them have answered it incorrectly, where you have mentioned as authentication. No, it will be non-repudiation. So you have performed something and you cannot deny that you have not performed it. You have in contract law principle of estoppel. That's the same principle over here. Okay. Next, 29. Which of the following is the most secure and economical method for connecting a private network over an internet or small organization 29. I'm a little surprised why only 50% have answered it right. Most of us in our offices have started using this virtual private network. Okay, the other three are very confusing. By the very name you'll be able to identify. So these are all confusing options, so they are not relevant as such. Then comes your 30th question. When planning an audit of a network setup, the IS auditor should give highest priority to obtain which of the following network documentation. Okay, here when you please note you're auditing a network. Okay, so therefore first you need to get a schematic diagram, wiring or schematic diagram, and therefore the answer will be option A. I repeat, the answer will be option A, which is wiring and schematic diagram. Only 25% have answered. User list and responsibilities is secondary. You're auditing a network, first highest priority as a part of documentation. First understand the diagram, then you take the test. It is like you auditing, you are going to one location, right, from A to B. So you need to know the path. Then you can know who all are coming along with you or whom are you going to meet, right? 31. Which of the following, sorry, when reviewing an organization's logical security, which of the following should be most concerning for an IS auditor? Password files are not encrypted. Wonderful. 49% have answered it right. Please note, passwords are not shared is good. Passwords are not encrypted is the biggest risky, because somebody in the backend can go and see it. Redundant logins are deleted. Somebody is going and deleting unwanted or old login IDs. It is not recommended, but still somebody has done it. Allocation of logins is controlled, which is still okay. So it is a most concern. So it should be a negative. Be very careful there. Next, question number 32. Which of the following propagation problems do wired and wireless have in common? And the answer is attenuation. Attenuation is nothing but signal drop. You may have a wired or you may have a wireless. Signal drop is always correct. Crosstalk, shadow zones, all those things are. Crosstalks, you would typically find it in a wired, but unwired also there is a possibility. The most common would be attenuation, which is signal weakness. Okay. Next, we'll quickly move on to 33. In the OSI model, provides for routing packets between which nodes. Okay, so which layer covers that? It is the network. Okay, packet layer is covered in the network, and the answer is B. 30% only have answered it. Many of them have mentioned transport. So again, OSI model, you'll have to relook into it, and please be very careful on the concepts and the related things. 34. 34. An organization provides information to supply chain partners and customers through an extranet infrastructure. Which of the following is the greatest risk of concern to an IS auditor reviewing a firewall security architecture? Okay, so the answer is the firewall is based on the commercial operating systems with all installation options. That would be the answer, 34D. And I notice only about 31% of them. Secure socket layer is implemented for user authentication and remote administration of firewall. It is not a concern, it is a good practice. The greatest concern is implementing firewalls on the commercial operating system. Why? Because I have kept firewalls more at the operating system level and not at the overall network layer. Next is your question number 35, change management. Okay, this is a very nice question. Change management procedures are established by IS management. For what purpose? Purpose is very simple: to control the movement of application from test to production. That is the main purpose. 35A. I think only 27% have answered. Many of them have answered to verify system changes are properly documented. No. Please note, the purpose is to transition between test to production. So those of you who have worked in SAP environments and done a few audits, you will realize there is something called as a change management, transport system, and things like that. 36. As an IS auditor is reviewing the database function to ascertain whether adequate provision has been made for controlling the data, the IS auditor should determine what the responsibilities are well defined. I think wonderful. Many of them have got this thing right. Some of them still audit software. Those unrelated options are still being chosen. IT operations for large organizations have been outsourced. An IS auditor reviewing the outsource operation should be most concerned about which of the following. The outsourcing contract does not have a disaster recovery. Again, 60% have answered it very well. Fantastic. Let's quickly go to 38, waterfall model. Waterfall's life cycle is a software development is most appropriately used when the requirements are well understood and expected to remain stable. Okay, so therefore 38A is the answer. I think again many of them have got it right. A little surprised why 14% have answered B and C. The project intends to apply for object-oriented design, or the requirements are well understood. The project is suitable under time pressure. No, waterfall takes fairly a good amount of time. 39th question. Which of the following would help to ensure portability of an application connected to the database? The answer would be a usage of a structured query language. 39, again, it's been a little Divergent answers, the answer is option B, usage of structured query. 40% have answered it, which is good. Let's quickly move on. SQL basically facilitates portability from one form to another because the tables and other things are fairly same. And SQL is typically applicable in relational database. 40. During an application audit, IS auditor finds several problems relating to corrupted data in the database. So what is it that I need to do? Implement data backup and recovery procedures. I think most of you have got it right. 32% have also, and I mentioned, ensure that only authorized personnel can update the database. See, please understand, this is subsequent. This is subsequent, but something has already happened. So you have to focus here on the corrective control. So corrective control is implement data backup and recovery procedures. Next is 41. Quickly moving in, we have another 5 minutes. Which of the following is most likely to occur when a system development project is in the middle of programming code facing? And here you typically do what is called unit test. Unit test, as I told you, I think we discussed also. Yeah, unit test is the answer. I think the option with the MCQ was appearing as a pilot test. I don't know why that has come up. The answer is unit test. I'm a little I'm so sorry. I went to the second one. Yeah, sorry. 41, unit test. Unit test, I think most of you have answered it right. Stress test is done after the system is ready. Integration is done when multiple modules are ready. Okay, quickly moving on to 42. 42, the answer is interface testing. Testing the connection of two or more components. I think we discussed in today's session also, where I made a mention of it. 43, which of the following validation edits is effective in detecting transposition and transcription errors? The answer is a check digit, and that's what PAN has. Especially when you interchange alphabets, your PAN gives you a error, or a credit card number also gives you an error. Okay, they use the Luhan algorithm to identify the check digit. 44. Which of the following groups should assume ownership of system development and the resulting system? It is user management. Remember, it is the user for whom you are developing the system. Senior management, project steering, system development, all these are secondary. Okay, so I think there's again a divergent view. Only 18% have answered it right. Majority have answered other things. This is where I keep on telling my dear friends, roles and responsibility is very, very important. 45. Which of the following would most likely indicate that the customer data warehouse should remain in-house rather than outsourced? The answer is more to do with privacy law. 45C. Wonderful. I have noticed a good number of people have answered it right. 46. An IS auditor reviewing an organization that uses cross-training practices should assess the risk of. Cross-training means multiple people know, or all the departments have equal knowledge on every other thing, correct? So one person knowing all parts of the system is obviously a little dangerous, correct? So I think again many of them have answered it right. 47. IS auditor performing general controls review of IS management practice relating to personnel should pay particular attention to functions assigned for the staff. Okay, whether there are specific roles and responsibilities assigned for each of those staff. So answer would be option D. Again, many of them have mentioned vacation policies are in compliance. That is okay, but whether the functions are being mentioned clearly is something which is important. 48. Which of the following network is primarily set up to serve as a security measure to prevent unauthorized traffic? The answer is firewall. Wonderful. 70% have answered it. Many of them have written router. My dear friends, routers are only to reroute the traffic. It has got nothing, I repeat, it has got nothing to do with the flow. Okay, it's not nothing to do with permission and approval and disapproval. Okay, 49. Which of the following groups individuals should assume overall direction and responsibility cost of system development projects? Is the steering committee. I think I mentioned it during our discussion today as well. So that is 51% have answered it. Fantastic, that's good. And last is regression testing is a process of testing a program to determine if the new code contains error. Okay, in this case the answer is option D. Changes have not introduced any new errors in the unchanged code. So if you heard me during the discussion, during the revision also, I made a mention of this. Only 36% have mentioned, 34% have mentioned discrepancies exist between functional specification and performance. No, that is where you do function testing. Okay, that is where you do functional testing. So that is, my dear friends, the end of this mock test and the discussion which I wanted to take you through today. And as I told you, my dear friends, this has been a short couple of hours discussion on examination preparation and tips. I'm sure you found it useful. Feel free to share your thoughts and questions, and I'm happy that you were all able to take up the mock test. The link of the mock test will still be active for some more time today, and after which we will disable it, because I understand some some of you would still want to take up the test. And it was a wonderful experience, and I thank the DAB for this doing this wonderful initiative of coming up with this interesting concept of DSAR revision class. And I'm sure this would be able to help you crack a lot of these things. All the very best. Take care. God bless all of you, and I hope all of you clear your exams in flying colors. Thank you.